afternoon. We are going to convene the Single Family Design Board meeting for August 28th of 2023. If we could please take roll call, and before we even do that, I'm going to remind all of the board members that we have to speak into our microphones because I reviewed our video from last week, and it was very difficult to hear some of us speaking. So please just get on those mics. Okay.
All right. Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Lewis.
Yes.
We have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, great. I will put my glasses on here. It's a Monday. Okay, we will start with item A, public comment. This is an opportunity for anybody from the public who would like to speak in an item that is germane and within the purview of our board about anything they are interested in or would like on record that is not part of today's agendized items. Is there anybody in the gallery that would like to speak? I do not see anybody. Ms. Mariah, would you please be kind enough to check with the...
There's no one on Zoom currently.
Okay, great. So we will close public comment and we'll go on to item B, which is approval of the minutes of the Single Family Design Board full board meeting of August 14th. Did anybody from the board have any comments or corrections to these meeting minutes? I have one item that I think is important to clarify. This is for item 1, 1830 Overlook Lane. It's related to, it's a portion of the motion, item 2. It's the last sentence. The board is concerned that the material will not represent a material that patinas over time like clay S-tile. I think what we were trying to say there is that it will not patina like concrete S-tile and or two-piece mission tile. So if we could just clarify that. No other comments? Okay, I'd like to make a motion for approval of these minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
If we could take a roll call, please.
All right. Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Lewis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We'll move on to the approval of the consent calendar items. We'll start with August 21st of 2023. I believe that Ms. Graffiti was present for that consent calendar.
Yes, I have reviewed the minutes and don't have any corrections, so I will make a motion to approve.
Great. I'm happy to second. If we could take a roll call, please.
All right. Chair Kalas,
Yes?
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffiti,
Yes.
Board Member Lewis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Somehow I'm missing my consent. Oh, you've got. Okay, I need those. Okay, and now we'll move on to the consent calendar minutes for August 28th. So that was for earlier today. And Ms. Anderson, you were present. Did you have any comments or corrections?
Well, I don't, but I'll answer your question. On item B, it's a granite ledge stone of similar to the Santa Barbara stone, and the client architect gave good reasoning around the veneer. And my main concern was the natural stone material versus an artificial. So I
Okay.
approved it.
It was
So-
just a question I had.
Okay, so yes, I would approve the consent.
Do you want to make a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the consent minutes from today, August 28th.
I'll second that. If we could take a roll call, please.
All right. Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Gerfeidi,
Yes.
Board Member Lewis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. So with that, we'll move on to item D, announcements, requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals.
I do have an announcement to make. The project for 1830 Overlook Lane, we did receive the appeal. So we'll be going to the Planning Commission, and we are getting the dates right now.
Okay, great. If we could be advised of when the date is, once you have that in hand, that would be very helpful.
Thanks, Sebastian and board members. Just to add on to that, to clarify, it was the project design approval and final approval that was heard at the full board and was denied. We had a 3-2 vote, so once you do find out the date, Sebastian will be reaching out to the board members, just hoping for some volunteers, a member who was with the motion and then a member who opposed the motion to attend Planning Commission, to have
Okay.
both sides there for representation. Thanks.
Thank you. I was going to ask Ms. Sherry to provide us with an update on last week's AIA work session related to streamlining, but Ms. Sherry's not here today, nor,
I can provide a quick update.
that would be great.
Yeah, Ted Hamilton Roll, he provided this. Sounds like the SFDB AI working group wrapped up last week, as you're mentioning. The next step in the process improvement effort is to give an update to the land development team oversight subcommittee on what's been heard from this outreach, and that is set to take place at the end of October. And I believe Ted and Ellen will be providing an update to the full board before they go to the subcommittee.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think that was it. I wanted to thank Ms. Kokinda and Ms. Garson for your help today locating some meeting minutes from an old item. We will move on to item number 1, 501 East Pedregosa Street. If the applicants could please step forward. And before the applicants begin, for full disclosure, I should just note that I went out today to take a look at the neighborhood, and in doing so, I ran across one of your neighbors, and we just had a quick conversation. He was sort of pointing out a couple things to me, and I thanked him for that, and just wanted to fully disclose that that ex parte communication had taken place. I should also let you know that I think about 25 years ago, I may have worked with somebody who was 2 owners before you on your home. And I don't recall if I actually ended up doing any building department drawings for him or not, but I did know Mr. Schneider who owned your home. So I just, we get mail at our house for people from 10 years ago too. So I just wanted to, out of full disclosure, I just wanted to let everybody know that. So if you would please present your project to us, you'll have 15 minutes to do so.
Apologies, board member, Chair Kalas, I do have some staff comments before we get started, and I actually don't recall did you read the project description into the record?
I have not read it in
Okay,
yet.
if you could do that first, and then I'll go off my comments.
Okay, great. So this project is a proposal to construct a 382 square foot 2-car garage with a 424 square foot roof deck accessed off of an existing deck. The staff hearing officer review and approval would be required for setback modifications to allow the garage to encroach in the required front and interior setback, and an open yard modification to allow the open yard to be reduced to accommodate new deck stairs. The proposed total of 3,083 square feet on a 6,274 square foot lot is 112% of the maximum guideline floor to lot area ratio. Because this is at concept review level, no appealable action may take place at this hearing. Neighborhood preservation findings in Hillside Design District, as well as slope lot findings, will be required for project design approval when that time comes. So So we'll let staff bring us up to speed, and then we'll have you do your little.
Thank you, Chair Kalas. I'm Pilar Plummer, Associate Planner with the City of Santa Barbara. And just a quick background, as it says in the project description, this is here for a conceptual review of the design. So staff is looking for comments regarding the aesthetic appropriateness of the 3 modifications that are requested, and then the overall design of the proposed garage. Just a little history for the site. In the early 2000s, modifications were approved for the current configuration to allow for 2 uncovered parking spaces in the area where the garage is now proposed. At that time, a open yard modification to allow the open yard to be 670 square feet was also approved. And as part of this project, they're slightly reducing it down to around 620 square feet approximately to allow for stairs related to the new roof deck. And that concludes my comments. If you have any questions, I'll be here throughout the hearing. I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you. Okay, if you could introduce yourselves for the record, and like I warned our board members, you need to make sure the light is nice and bright. That's what it'll look like when that'll look what it looks like when it's on, and
I'm
that you
Susan
really need to get
Sherwin.
very
Oh,
close.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm Susan Sherwin, I'm the architect, and go ahead, Allison.
I'm Allison French, and I live at 501 East Pedregosa.
Okay, so I think it's, in terms of what we're doing here, it's fairly straightforward. We're proposing to build a garage in the place of 2 uncovered parking spaces. And we would like to build a roof deck on top of this garage to provide more outdoor living space for the owners. So I'm trying to see if, the existing configuration of the house is there, and there's an existing deck that looks over towards Emerson. We're looking at existing elevations, and then this would be our proposed elevation with our proposed garage right here. And a roof deck on top. It's a little bit hard to do this, but there's a number of roof decks and garages, so on the street and right at property lines along Emerson, because it is a crowded neighborhood, a very narrow street. And I have documented some of these in photographs here. These are all along Emerson. The garage would provide covered parking in this area where the city wants covered parking in general, and it would provide parking plus more outdoor living space if we could have the roof deck. The neighbors, we have tried to negotiate with the neighbors about this and talk to them about it. I have seen the public comments that they have written into the city, and I feel like first of all, the height limit that they are showing is their lot is 3 feet higher than, so there's a 3-foot high retaining wall, so their lot is already 3 feet higher than our property, where the finished floor of the garage. And the neighbors often use this driveway to turn around in. They also often park their cars kind of over the sidewalk, which is difficult. I don't know if I have that photo.
Slightly displayed on the Google.
Yeah. Well, this is an example that we can show. And our
For
existing.
the record, maybe we can have the camera placed on here, please. Where am I at? Okay, here we go.
Very good.
Yeah, so that's the neighboring property,
Let me
and
just move this over closer, please. tough because we're not.
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to see,
Okay.
but in any event, it's a very crowded neighborhood with a lot of street parking, and we're attempting to get more, get our cars off the road and into a garage. And Allison, do you want to, I know you have some comments that you want to make.
A little statement. Again, my name is, hi, again, my name is Allison French, and I appreciate you letting me speak today. My parents and I are the owners of 501 East Pedregosa. I live in the house with my 7-month-old son. We love the neighborhood, the charm, many kind people we've met throughout the neighborhood, and just the general vibe of the community where people look out for one another. Situated on the corner of Emerson and Pedregosa, however, presents many challenges to mine and my child's safety. I work from home every day, and I estimate at least 15 cars, delivery trucks, service trucks, use my driveway to turn around in, most doing it as quick as possible in fear of getting in the way of oncoming traffic that comes up Emerson. My building a garage will eliminate this turnaround problem. My driveway is partly chosen, I believe, as a turnaround spot because with a lack of street parking, some neighbors park their cars by overlapping both private driveway space and public sidewalk, as seen in that photo. Blocked sidewalks create an additional danger for pedestrians, kids, and parents with strollers who are forced to walk into the street to get around these blocking cars. And because Roosevelt Elementary School backs up onto Emerson, lots of kids have to be very careful. I watch them every morning and afternoon, kind of go on the sidewalk and then out into the street. So again, a garage would eliminate some, maybe those people who block the driveway would then be allowed to park on the street because there'd be more space. And while my house does occupy a decent-sized corner lot, there's very little private space or flat surfaces for play. If I'm allowed to build a garage with a deck, I can use the existing backyard for a play space for my son and the roof deck as a quiet space for myself. I hope to live in this house for many years, and I plan to send my son to Roosevelt Elementary School. And I'm just asking for to be permitted to build a garage and a deck, just like so many others have in the neighborhood going up Emerson. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us before we move on?
No, I think it's, the proposal is straightforward. It's, and as said, there are a number of examples of this in the neighborhood, so I don't think we're asking for anything that other people don't have.
And I think because there's triplexes, it's just so many people in such a, again, like it's a tiny street. So there's just, the population is.
Density,
Dense,
we
yes.
all have to get used to it.
Yes.
It's going to get worse. Okay, thank you very much. We'll note that you have a little over almost 9 minutes left in case you have anything else to share with us in the future. So at this time, we're going to open this to public comment for those who are interested in speaking on this item. If you're in the gallery and if you want to speak on this item and have not yet, could you please provide a speaker slip to Ms. Mariah? And I will turn it over to you.
All right,
for
thank you. Thank you,
managing.
Chair Kalas. I'll go ahead and start with in-person public comment. At this time, I do have 3 requests to speak. So I'll go ahead and start with Laura Erickson. If you can make your way up to the podium, you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
If you are a neighbor and you're speaking, it would be very helpful for us on the board to know where your home is located relative to the subject property.
Okay. Again, I'm Laura Erickson. I own the duplex on 1914 Emerson, so just right up. And I guess my concern is the 3 variances, particularly the variances for the interior and frontal setback. So if this project's built, we'd have right on our property line garage height and rooftop height. And it would really impact my tenants. There's a patio there, there's a downstairs room there, and it would make things darker, just be like a wall up on one side of our patio. So lack of privacy, sunlight, enjoyability of the downstairs room and patio. So I just recommend that this project be denied in the current state it has been proposed.
Thank you very much.
Okay, up next, we have Max Fixler. If you would make your way up to the podium, you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Sorry. I took notes on my phone, so. Hello, my name is Mac Fixler, and I am a tenant of 1914 Emerson Avenue. Laura is my landlord, and I am in the property directly next to the applicants. I've been living there for 10 years now, and I'd like to go on record that me and my 3 housemates do not support this project. This would be cause a huge amount of breach of privacy for us, as the deck would be very close to our kitchen height level and our bedroom, and so it would be very easy for them to see into our house, which we do not really appreciate. Additionally, one of our rooms would be completely blocked out by all sun and natural light, which is really not a great living condition. I don't see this garage as a way to create more parking. There's 2 parking spots available now. There will be 2 parking spots available at the end of it. And ultimately, the people that are using the driveway as a turnaround point are not going to stop using it as a turnaround point just because there's a garage. And the cars that are currently parked there on the driveway are not blocking the sidewalk in any way, shape, or form. I do not see this garage as something our neighborhood needs, and I see this as a way to get more living space out of their outside area. I do not wish this project to go forward. I do not think it would be good for our neighborhood. This site has had a tremendous amount of construction over the years, and I don't think we need more construction, especially for something that's not going to create more parking in a neighborhood where there's not a ton of parking. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Fixler.
And lastly, we have Bob Grebel. If you would like to make your way up to the podium, you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Hello, my name is Bob Grapel, G-R-E-B-I-L. I live on the property right next to 501 Pedregosa. I'm at 1914 Emerson. I've been there for 30 years. I've been through 4 different owners of that house, 501, and never in the past has there been an issue with parking on our street and in the driveway. The proposal definitely will, it's 15, 16 feet from the ground level up, which I don't know if you've seen the pictures at all. It restricts the view, the patio that's on our property would be completely, blocked out. And I don't feel that the garage is necessary because there is adequate parking in their driveway now. So, and yes, Emerson Avenue is a lot of multi-family dwellings, and it's been that way. I've been there 30 years. My kids went to Roosevelt. The traffic on Emerson is never going to stop. Everybody uses that route for the Rose Garden. So if there's an issue about kids playing, the Rose Garden is right up the street, and it's an adequate spot for anybody to play, dogs, kids, family outings, as regardless. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gribble.
All right, at this time, I haven't received any further speaker slips, and I don't see anyone else move.
Would you like to provide public comment? Yeah, just a little. Would you like to approach the podium? We can get your speaker slip after.
Hi, my name is Patricia French. I also am an owner of 501 East Pedregosa. I just want to say to our neighbors here that we don't mean to create any harm. We're trying to live. Allison and her son and family want to live there forever, as you have, a new generation of people coming. And garages seem to me, it's a small garage. It was designed in a style that would fit the neighborhood. It also from the perspective of someone who goes up and down those stairs every day, right now, we hear everything from everybody next door. It's part of living in a city. I understand that. But this, it's not 15 feet tall, but this wall would not, it would create more privacy for everybody. From the downstairs unit to the upstairs unit, it would create some shelter, and we're willing to talk to our neighbors about that. Just wanted you to know that we're trying to do a positive improvement that would last for many years in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, I haven't received any further speaker slips. And I don't see anyone else moving to speak, so I'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. If you wish to speak online at this time, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. I don't see any hands raised on Zoom, but we did receive several letters from Emerson Sekbon, Bob and A.B. Grebel, Karen Stickland, and Laura Erickson. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Kloss.
Thank you. Question for staff, and this was broached quickly, I think, before we went live, but if staff could just clarify, this is an R2 lot. So this lot is an R2 lot, so we're dealing with a guideline, not a required floor to lot area ratio, just so that the other board members are aware of that. And I will go ahead and open it up to questions from the board at this time. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. My first question is if you considered any plant screening or other kind of screening devices between the outdoor living space on the second story and the neighbors.
Yes, we did. In fact, we offered that at the very beginning when we were discussing this project with the neighbors, and they basically said they weren't interested in that idea. I personally think it would be a good idea to have some sort of built-in planter there that would, give a visual green screening to this. I also want to correct what was said. The project is not 15 or 16 feet high. It's an 8-foot plate, 12 inches of structure, and then a 42-inch railing. So it's essentially 12 and a half feet high.
And then the only other question, it looks like 2 garage doors, but looking at the existing photos, it looks like really it's a one-car garage, right?
We are modifying the existing deck to create a
Okay.
slightly wider garage so that we can fit 2 cars.
Okay. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
Were any solar studies or any thing of that nature done just to see if there's impacts?
No, we do not actually, none of the windows from 1914 Emerson actually face directly onto this new roof deck. The roof deck is largely in front of them. There's upper story windows that are behind the new roof deck, and then there's a lower story window that faces the street. So we're not really, And the railing would be basically somewhat permeable in terms of sunshine, so we're not, so the building is not.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Anderson, do you have any questions?
Yes. Pilar, these are for you. We're looking at a modification for front and side yard, as well as open yard. Okay, because right.
Through the chair, board member Anderson, yes, there's 3 modifications. One is for the front setback encroachment. The second is for the interior setback encroachment to have the building on the property line. And then the third is for a very slight reduction in the already non-conforming open yard, going from 670 to around 620 square feet.
I have a couple of questions. And this may be for the applicant, it may be for staff, so I'll just ask the question. So if this were to be built, you're taking away part of your existing deck, I'll call it your deck, that's immediately adjunct to the house, and then you have some open yard space sort of on the north side. So once we take away what you're taking away and put it back along with what the top of the garage would be, approximately how many square feet combined would you have between your recognized open yard and what would be the constructed deck over the garage? Do you know about what you would have?
So the roof deck, sorry, I'm kind of zipping back and
I
forth
mean, I'm
here.
seeing that it's 424 square feet, but I don't
Right.
know how much you're losing in order to accomplish that, and so I'm just,
Well, we're not, the only thing that we're losing is the stairs that go from the new roof deck to the open yard, and they're considering that we're losing open yard with that stairway that goes to the rear yard. So, I mean, in my mind, and we're really creating more open yard space because we've got this roof deck, but because it's, I think, more than 30 inches above the ground.
To clarify, so in terms of how we calculate open yard, the roof deck that's being proposed doesn't qualify to meet our open yard standards. So while it will provide for outdoor living space clearly, it's not actually counted in the formal total. So that's why we're saying it's a reduction in open yard to allow for the deck stairs.
okay. So the next question is a question for the applicant. Oh, did you have another one? Yeah. Oh, I asked you, I thought you were done, I'm sorry.
No, I'm not
Please,
done.
please continue with the questions. I'm sorry.
Pilar, this might be for you too, because I have lived in the area where there are many of the Santa Barbara Stone single-car and dual spaces, you know, constructed way back when with the original houses. So they're scattered throughout on the street. You can see them. So I'm trying to get to the historically, was this house designed, was that something that I can say was designed with these houses originally back in the 1900s? Typically, or it's just pretty random through the street, one of every 5 has that single car or dual car garage right on the front property line?
So, through the chair, Board Member Kalas, it's likely, that there are buildings within the neighborhood that are non-conforming, so they're built prior to our ordinance, right? And that would explain, the construction of a garage right at the street with a roof deck. I can't speculate, without looking at the permit history for those, but that would be the likely case.
Okay, thank you. And this is for the architect and applicant. Was there an existing garage ever that you know of, or no?
No.
Okay. Did you consider a single car under the house parking, tandem parking, just to reduce the amount of, on the front setback parking?
There's not enough height under the house, and the foundation system is old, so there's all these piers. I mean, we would basically have to re-engineer the foundation of the house in order to do something like that. Plus, we would have to change where the driveway was.
To the applicant, if you can just pull the microphone a little bit closer
sorry.
and make
Okay.
sure that it's on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then if you could just go into a little more detail about the garage materials and plate heights that you're proposing to tie it into the existing house.
Okay. The existing house has a stucco exterior, and it's somewhat a craftsman-style house. So we are proposing to have the garage have a stucco exterior, and we're trying to, emote this craftsman feel with the garage doors that we are using here. The front of the house particularly has a more of a craftsman feel. And so, yes, so we're trying to use these. And then the railings are just going to match the railings that are already existing on the decks. So they're a pretty simple iron railing. I can show you photos of the existing house again, if that helps. Oops. Oops, sorry.
Well, and you're at a 9-foot plate. I'm looking because you did not go over that. A lot of the garages build the parapet up so you don't really see the full railing, which is architecturally a little bit more congruent. So what do you have in regards to the height of your garage proposal?
The proposed garage has an 8-foot plate height and then essentially a foot of structure and then the railing on top of that. I mean, I think we would be willing to consider a parapet, but in effect, that's just making the solid part of the building more larger. So I'm not sure that that's going to benefit anyone.
Okay, all right. And you talked a little bit about your adjacent neighbor and the solutions. Is there anything else you want to offer that you considered to satisfy that neighbor?
Well, we talked about building some sort of a screening wall or planter along that way. I mean, there's really nowhere else to move the garage over to. I mean, it's not like we can move it over 10 feet. If we would, we wouldn't be here. And yeah, so the neighbors, there's seem to be a lot of people living next door. And I think they have often 7 or 8 cars in their driveway, and I don't think they use their garages for parking at all. So there's a lot of cars that are there, and I think it is just, it's kind of it's part of the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I'll ask my questions. She's really strong. I don't want to get in an argument with her. So I think I was starting to go where Ms. Anderson was. So can we look back at the photo that shows your property along with the retaining the CMU block wall for the property at night? This one,
Right
yes,
here.
on the lower right. Okay.
It's slightly outdated because there's now a fence.
Yeah, there's now a fence, like about a 4.5
Yeah, they've
foot high
got a
fence right here.
horizontal, I
Yeah.
saw that today, okay. So it looks to me like your driveway, and when I say your driveway, I'm not talking about the curb cut, I'm talking about, from property line back. It looks like it slopes up slightly. Is that true?
It does, and we would be
Flattening that
digging,
out?
yeah, flattening it out just to have enough slope in the garage to drain, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so right now at the front property line, it appears that that wall is about, I'll call it 42 inches maybe, with, we've got 5 8-inch CMU blocks and some grout joints.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's about 42 inches, and you're saying that you're going to have an 8-foot plate plus a foot of structure plus some waterproofing and decking. So you're going to be somewhere around call it 9.5 feet to the top of the deck, just roughly. Does that
Max,
seem
yeah.
reasonable?
Max, yeah.
Okay. So that's 108 plus 6, it's 114 inches minus 42. It means you'd be roughly 5 feet above that. If you were to keep your garage level, you'd be roughly, and if that wall is level as it goes north, you'd be roughly 5 feet above that to the top of your deck. Does that sound approximately right?
Yes.
Okay. And then your guardrail would be further by 42 inches. Okay, so 5 feet plus roughly 3.5 feet. So to the top of a guardrail, a parapet, a screening wall, whatever it would be, you'd be 8.5 feet above what appears to be their walking surface. Is that approximately right?
Yes.
Okay. On the east elevation of the property at 1914, there's a window up high that I can see, and it looks like a door down low.
And there's another window behind the chimney.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are the windows that are,
And are there any other windows on the first floor behind the chimney that I can't see in this photo?
Well, there's one facing the street, not facing the house.
yeah, I don't believe there's any windows on the ground floor.
There is
Because
a window on the ground floor.
behind the chimney.
And that's on the north side,
Okay.
north end of that wall.
Right, but
As well as a door that is a primary point of ingress.
For the third unit.
Right, I see the door. So, I'm going to ask the gallery to abstain. It's the applicant's job, and if I have a question, I'll ask that of you. Thank you. So, the window that's at the north end of that wall on the neighboring property, is that roughly in line with your existing deck, or would that be in the area where the proposed garage is going?
I believe, you can say I'm wrong, I believe it faces the current open backyard because I can't even see it. So I believe, so with the current backyard, I think it faces the wall. We can't see through to that because there is a wall with greenery on it.
To the applicant, can you confirm your mic's on and
That wasn't
please
on.
speak into
Sorry,
it?
it wasn't on. Unless I'm wrong, I believe the window that the gentleman's referring to currently faces the current yard we have. It wouldn't face the garage because I can't even, I've never seen it.
So it's
And we have a
probably,
wall as is with greenery on it, and that's probably why I can't see it.
so that chimney's probably at the ridge line, and that window's probably behind that.
Yes, the chimney's here, and these are the two upstairs windows. This is the, and these are the other windows. So as I said, this new proposed garage and roof deck really isn't in front of any of their windows.
Okay. And the last question that I have for the applicant is, so I did drive the neighborhood, and one of the things that I'm looking at is patterns of development in the neighborhood and whether there's precedent or not. And I do think there's precedent for, a garage on the property line because that happens all over the Riviera. But what I'm concerned about here is the orientation of it. So as I drive through this neighborhood, most of these, I'll call them old Model T garages that are, or some of them are now doubles, but historically they're Model T garages that are out on the property line. Most of them that I saw in this immediate neighborhood are on the southeast corner of a property. That creates an issue for you because you're a corner property that faces Pedregosa Street. But my question is, do you know of any others in the neighborhood that are on the southwest corner of the parcels?
I don't know, but do you? I mean,
Because I was driving and I'm trying to figure out, which garage is associated with which house, right? And so I'm doing my best to ascertain that just from how they look.
Of the street. So that's on the other side if you go down one.
that's on the north side of there.
Down to that one. I see what you're saying.
So the one that's on the lower left photo, is that associated with the house that we're seeing or the house that we're not seeing to the left of it?
I think that one is associated with the house that we're seeing, because I tried to take pictures of the houses that we were seeing.
Is that at 1924?
501 Orena. So that's a corner lot too, I believe.
Yeah, it's on the corner of Emerson and Arena. And there's a deck on top.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks like the pad connects it on the right side of the garage.
Right, and those are just garages on the street. And this one, actually, so this one belongs to this house. So that one is on the southwest corner, because it belongs to this little craftsman. And that's on Emerson. That's 2112.
Okay. And then a question for staff. Is this property subject to 2 front yard setbacks?
Chair Claus, yes, it would be subject to 2 front setbacks. Mhm.
Okay, those are my only questions. So I'll open it up to, does anybody else have any follow-up questions?
I just had one. I just wanted to confirm from staff that it's hard in the picture and just driving by. It looks really like there's only space for one car, but you mentioned it is in fact zoned for 2 spots for the current setup? Like two uncovered spaces?
Through the chair, board member, it's currently permitted with 2 uncovered parking spaces. And the requirement for single family is 2 covered. So they received modifications to allow for uncovered and for the current configuration, which is encroaching in the setbacks.
Okay,
I can start us with comments.
wonderful, that'd be
Okay.
great. Please, Ms. Lewis.
I think that it's very compatible with the neighborhood to have these garages right up against the property line and several that are up against the neighbor as well. It looks like the apartment complex to the left has gone through variations of having screening plants and not. I think in terms of privacy and looking through this, I mean, typically we would want to see decks further away from a property line. What I'm struggling with is that doesn't really help you with any visibility here, because if you already where you've got deck space, you're able to see up towards the windows. You're not really overlooking anything but an entrance that you can already see without it. So I don't think that there's any changes to privacy by doing this. But would be open to having screening plants if that's something that is compatible with the neighbor. I don't see any issues with lighting, especially because there's no first floor windows on that first section. I do think, since this is concept, coming back again for additional materials, I think it'd be helpful in the elevations to show where their wall is, where the door height is, and where the window height is. And then, and being able to see that in the plan as well. Clearly, it appears from what we were looking at that the windows are already on where your open yard is, not where the garage is. And I think being able to show that and see that is helpful. But yeah, I think it's going to be a nicer condition than having the cars out here. It'll be safer, and you have such a compact site. I think it would allow you the outdoor space and be nice. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Ms. Graffiti or Ms. Anderson?
Agree with Ms. Lewis. I think that the part I'm struggling with the most is just having enough information to be like, yes, I'm accepting of what you're proposing. It's hard for us as a board if we don't have the neighbor context and the elevations and something maybe three-dimensional with the controversial neighbor to the left or the 1914. So if you can provide that information with, site elevations a little bit further, that would make it a lot easier to want to accept a proposal that is encroaching into, both front and side yard setbacks. The railing, the full height railing for me is a struggle with the arts and crafts style to see that. So that's my other comment. And would want to see colors too of what you're proposing. I mean, I'm assuming that you may be thinking about that, but yeah, I'm not going to propose that you reduce the grade in order to bring everything down, but
We actually did consider that. We also considered a 7-foot plate height in the garage, but we
Yeah.
could not get the garage doors to work. We didn't have enough height for the garage door openers, and if we swung out, then we were swinging over the sidewalk, so it just didn't work.
okay, thank you.
Ms. Graffiti?
Yeah, I agree with what has been said by my other board members. It's so tough. I really feel for everyone who's spoken today on both sides and understanding the intentions. I do think there's positive intentions by the applicant, and there's a lot that has been thought through in terms of just in general, if a garage, on the property line, there's enough context in the neighborhood. I think in general, yes, and I'm less concerned about maybe like the side of the property. I do think that a lot of the other ones that I noticed today, though, are less near an existing structure or heavily used area. And so I think that's what I'm struggling with a little bit more. I noticed a lot that are next to more of an open yard area and the structure set back quite a bit. And so I just am trying to understand how significant that impact is going to be, with understanding also the goals that you have. So similar to what Board Member Anderson mentioned, if it is possible to provide, I mean, we're just here for concept, we're not voting today, but if at the next meeting you could provide an elevation or some sort of model that could help us really see what that impact is going to be and the heights and all of that, that would help me a lot to understand if this is something I would be able to support or not. But I can tell, again, you considered a lot of different factors and are really trying to, minimize the impact, and I appreciate that.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, I think the last one that I'll make, I think you're showing it in the front elevation and even some of these photographs, but it appears that the garage is it's less than 2 feet above where the screening fence already is. I think being able to show that for privacy's sake and other things, that it's not a significant change in what your kind of privacy levels are in this area. But I do think also in the site plan, being able to see their front yard area and showing a little bit more context there, and what maybe potential screening options right there. I'm less concerned with the screening right by the door.
It's funny because I find myself struggling with this, and I don't think that, for some reason, normally I don't think I would, but I am for some reason. And I think what's got me struggling with this is that I think although you're constricted by certain setback requirements, I think the home that you have has great advantage versus what would typically be allowed on it. And now you're asking for more. And so, and I'm hearing an outcry from neighbors. And so it's kind of, and so it moves us into a discretionary area that makes me start thinking about how can there be more give and take where this can become more palatable for the neighbors. I agree that having this on property line, I think that having the garage on property line is in keeping with the patterns of development. I think it would be more in keeping with the pattern of development if it were on the southeast side, because what happens when it's on the southeast side is whose view are you blocking? Your own, right? But when you move it over to the other side, it starts impacting other neighbors. We as a board, say this at every meeting, do not have any purview over private views. So I cannot take that into consideration as much as I would like to sometimes. I can't do that. Clearly, if you put this on property line, you're going to block their little front yard view. There's nothing I can do about that. That's between you and your neighbors. So I think that putting it on property line meets an existing pattern of development. I don't think, I agree with Ms. Lewis, I don't think there's as large of privacy impacts as might be perceived, because there really is only kind of this side entry door. But if that were my entry door, I surely wouldn't want somebody on a deck next door looking down over me every time I come in and out of my house. So I start thinking of how can we resolve that from the use of the deck standpoint? And I think it sounds like you've tried to present some options to the neighbors of, well, maybe we have some vegetation there, or maybe we have a completely solid wall or something like that. I don't know if you've considered the idea of moving the rail or the wall back from property line so that somebody can't stand directly adjacent to property line and peer over. And I've been working on a little doodle here, like what are options? I think that might be something that you could consider in order to provide the people who are entering the apartment next door with some privacy and some relief from that visual impact. And there might be a way to do that, where it's set back and there is some planting there so that that wall becomes something nice for them to walk next to. So I personally would like to see some more development on that property line that would start addressing some of these privacy issues, because privacy is our purview. And although I think you've attempted a dialogue, I think there's probably a better resolution for that that's possible still. The only other thought I have is, so right now is your existing deck over, is that just retained and earth-filled? The existing open yard space?
Yes, there's a retaining wall at the back of the existing parking
Okay.
area.
So if you were trying to push the garage back in a northerly direction, you would have to shore up the house, remove all of that.
And
in
we'd be
order-
losing more of the open yard that we're already
Right, you'd have to
lacking
get
in.
staff to agree
Yes.
that that would still
Yeah.
be recognized in
Yeah.
some way, right? Okay.
Plus, I feel like then we would be actually getting closer to where their windows are rather than further away, where right now we're ahead, towards the street from their windows.
That's true. Okay. So those are my comments. Would anybody care to, so this is only before us for conceptual, and these would be comments for the board, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Plummer, for the board, for the applicants to either return to the board with comments directing them as to what we're looking for, or we would be moving them on potentially to the staff hearing officer with comments on the aesthetics of what sits in front of us today. Does that make sense?
And through the chair, I just want to add on to that, that's correct. So either you can continue it with comments back to the full board, or you can continue it indefinitely to the staff hearing officer for review of the 3 modifications that are being requested. Again, your purview is the aesthetic appropriateness of the design within those setback areas, and the staff hearing officer reviews the actual encroachments and the reduction of open yard. So that's up to the discretion of the board.
So I'm just gonna say that I would not be comfortable making positive comments at this juncture for the staff hearing officer. That's not to say it won't pass a motion. I'm just saying I personally would not.
I agree. I wouldn't be able to either.
So I can make the motion to, and you guys help me with the comments.
Just go ahead and make a motion and
Because
then
I
we'll
hear them
amend it.
all, and I'm like, okay, well, how do I say that concise? But I would like to make a motion to return or continue back to the full board with the following comments. That you take the applicant and architect, take a further look at the screening options with the adjacent neighbor, providing as much privacy as possible, with the possibility of what we've already discussed, the planters, possibly setting the railing back from that, front and side yard, just to give some relief to the massing of a 2-car garage as well. further providing a little more detail in a site section of that adjacent neighbor and your garage, so that we can see the heights better. And, you know, a three-dimensional rendering or something, it really would help look at the garage and the railing and how that fits with the adjacent building. It can be very conceptual. Also provide, please, colors of the garage doors and materials that you're proposing. Let's see. And then I believe the positive comments as well is there are the patterns of the development for the garage in the neighborhood. So, you know, compatibility with the neighborhood is probably our top item, or one of the top items that we review. So I just wanted to make note that there is the context for this garage on your property. So please add on.
So I'll second that, and I would like to request, and I think you were alluding to this, Ms. Anderson, that we, when you return to the full board, that you bring information on relative heights as it relates to the westerly neighbor, so that we don't understand just the absolute heights of your proposal, but how far above the adjacent property we would anticipate those to be. And to further clarify your comment, Ms. Anderson, on the railing and relief from the walls of the garage, that would be most specifically for the south and westerly edges or walls of the garage. Is that amenable to the maker of the motion?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. I will re-second the motion. If we could please take a roll call.
All right, Chair Kalas,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffitti,
Yes.
Board Member Lewis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
And we want to thank the neighbors for coming in. It's always helpful for us to have the neighbors. This will be a project that will require neighborhood cooperation. It's occurring on a property line, and it will require a lot of coordination during construction. So the degree to which everybody can walk away from this and still be able to shake hands and drink a glass of wine at sunset, it's going to help everybody moving forward. So thank you very much for your participation. Okay, the next item on calendar is, we're running just a tick late, apologies. 1231 Calle Cerrito Alto, concept review. The existing site is developed with a 5,149 square foot single unit residence with an attached 610 square foot garage. The proposal is to construct a 1,870 square foot detached accessory building comprised of a 674 square foot garage that will include a workshop and a 1,196 square foot accessory dwelling unit above, with a 275 square foot covered deck at the first floor of the unit and a 71 square foot covered deck at the second floor. The project includes a new pool, spa, and associated patio area, a new driveway to serve the ADU, garage, and hardscape and landscape improvements is also included. Staff hearing officer review and approval is required for zoning modifications to allow the accessory building location in the front yard and to grant relief from accessory building and garage floor limitations. The proposed total of 7,292 square feet on a 2.0 acre lot is 131% of the maximum guideline floor to lot area ratio. This is before us for concept. No appealable action can take place at this hearing. Neighborhood preservation findings, hillside design district and slope lot findings, as well as grading findings will be required if this project comes before us for PDA. Ms. Plummer, are you also the planner on this project?
Chair Class, yes, I am.
Great.
And I do have just some brief comments. I think most of it was summarized in the project description, but this project is before you for feedback on several modifications that are required related to the new accessory building. So one, some of it's a bit of a technicalities. The site is already developed with a 3-car garage, and there are size limitations on the amount of garage floor area on a property. So with this new garage that's being proposed to serve the accessory dwelling unit, they will be going over the maximum allowed, which is 750 square feet of garage space on a property. The accessory building is also located in the front yard, so any comments about that? And then total accessory building floor area on the lot.
Okay. If you could please introduce yourselves and your project for us, that would be great.
Great. Is this mic on? Thank you, Chair Kalas. Thank you, Pilar, for the introduction. My name is Liz Hughes, presenting for Tom Oxner Architect, and we also have the landscape architect here as well to present the landscape design for the project.
I'm Sam Maphis with Earthform Design.
Okay. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction of the location of the project site, some of the site constraints, and our general thoughts about the location of the proposed ADU, and then I'll let Sam take over about the landscape design. So as an introduction to the project, this project site is located on technically Alta Mesa, but it's on the back side, the north-facing side of the mesa, so it's a kind of a unique property that's overlooking downtown and the mountain areas. If you look, I'm going to kind of zoom in on some of these photos here so you can get a sense of it, but this is kind of the view from the existing residence down the driveway, and you can see from this was the previously the originally permitted site plan here. And it's showing this long serpentine driveway that kind of comes up to the backside of the property, which is where this main residence is located. The original residence was built in 1982 by the current property owner's father. It's a Mediterranean style architecture, although it's got that 80s flair to it, so not quite what we would consider a historic style, but we're kind of adopting the Mediterranean style for the ADU as well. Because of the location of the existing residence high up on the hill, there wasn't really an opportunity to place the ADU on the backside. So that's why it is located in the front yard, because we have so much area in the front, which is also very well screened from the street. So these are some views of that existing residence. Here's that existing garage, the 3-car garage, and then some of these other views. This is kind of looking up at where our proposed ADU location will be. It's kind of located in a little bit of a clearing here. The site is very steeply sloped, so it was hard to find a good spot for it that was kind of far enough away from the main house and low enough. But there's actually an existing turnout, which you can see here. And I'm not sure if they did this for fire access, but it seems to work well with the grade and the slope of the site. So we were kind of placing that ADU in this little clearing area here. These are just some views from the main residence. Again, that's the the side of the main residence that overlooks the view. And I just want to talk a little bit about this, the street and the neighborhood. So this is actually a cul-de-sac, kind of a dead end here, and there are 3 other residences that that share this cul-de-sac, and then there's kind of 2 other residences on the street coming up here. But Most of these other residences are kind of oriented away from this hillside to kind of take advantage of the views. So this is the entry to the driveway here. And you can kind of see this cluster of trees right here, and the proposed ADU is located behind these trees. I'll just go, this is our survey here showing that steeply sloped site, the driveway, and I'll let Sam take over here for the landscape design.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. So, as you know, the site is sloping kind of to the north and east. The ADU is dug into the hill, mostly excavated, a little bit of daylight exposed at the upper level in the back, and then it goes up quite steeply from there. And what I hoped you'd notice in some of those photographs, which we can go back and see, is that behind the main house is really a flat lawn area that comes out quite a ways from the existing residence in that porch, and it actually starts to drop off. The contours start to peel off right in that area by where we're putting a little retaining wall. That wall will be 4 to 6 feet in height, then that will drop us down to this mid kind of level where the pool is proposed. But that whole upper area is where the owner would like to continue his very social life and entertain and look at the views from that very beautiful upper view spot. And then we're hoping to do a shade structure up against the existing Brazilian peppers that line the upper or kind of the northwest side of the property. You really can't see this house until you're all the way at the top. It's hidden by very, very dense foliage all the way down that north side where those contour lines are. It's very impenetrable almost. And then there's a couple of beautiful oak trees as you get down to the middle or 3/4 to the right side of the drawing above the ADU, where there's some really nice shade areas and a beautiful trunked oak tree combination. And we hope to utilize some small trails, kind of walking trails like you'd have at Elings or at Rocky Nook Park or up in Mission Canyon. So we're trying to make a very natural approach to get to the lower part of the property and wind our way down with very gentle trails and pathways to the ADU. Again, the ADU is tucked down. We will look over that rooftop for the most part from these outdoor areas and the entertaining areas that we're hoping to create. So the Infinity Edge pool is one of the features that the owner is very excited about. That will be in-ground. Pretty much the 340 elevation of that pool level is what it's at right now, the existing grade. There'll be some fill on the east side, northeast side, where we're going to put some boulder walls. And so we hope to have some nice terraces and garden effects, so you won't really see those patios, you won't really see the bond beam. There's about a 5-foot drop for the Infinity Edge to a little trough that catches and recirculates the water. So we're really not exposing a lot of wall that isn't organic or very natural looking to the city. And it's, again, tucked behind the ADU, so I don't think any neighbor will see that activity up there any more than they do now. So we have a big grouping of Monterey pines at the bottom of the little ridge that are existing and to remain. We have oak trees and Brazilian peppers.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
When you're walking us through the site plan, can you do me a favor and cursor over those areas? You're much more familiar with this than
Oh, I'm
us,
sorry. I should be
and I'm trying to
pointing
go
them out.
northeast and southwest.
jumping
and
you
yeah, It would be
everywhere.
very helpful.
I'll,
My
I'll try
apologies.
and, thank you, follow along here, the cursor. I was doing that a little bit at the beginning, but.
So if
Okay.
we want to start at towards the house, I'll just go briefly again. That patio exists, and there's a lawn right there that we're just going to preserve and then add some patio towards the north and a fireplace and a trellis there for that outdoor entertaining. Then we come to kind of a Juliet stair, then we come down and then go either north or south. North towards a little outdoor kitchen and a sitting area for dining, kind of by the pool. And then that deck is all flat as you go down to the other side towards the fire pit. And that area is a little bit of fill, I think about 4 feet of fill there with that rock retaining wall terrace. And then if you continue to kind of go around, you'll see the pool equipment up between the two patios is tucked into the ground in a bunker. So that should be very quiet, and it'll be hidden by the existing trees, and we'll be planting all these planter gardens, as you see, with many native plants and some exotic plants, but the planting plan is yet to be discovered. We're still working with the owner on all those things. The way to get to the ADU is on the north side pathway, and that winds around at grade. And it'll be a little bit of grading with some cobble-type borders for a DG stone walkway, very gentle, we hope. And then below the spillway, we have a little sitting area just to enjoy the effect. And there's a potential fire pit and overlook, so to speak, that looks down at the magnificent views. Then we wind our way across, coming south around the ADU, and I've got a little garden folly. He talked about a little yoga area where you could sit in the shade and have some peaceful meditation time. So that's just a small garden structure that is a shade and open with no walls. And then we continue coming around to that ADU upper deck. So we're actually going to be arriving at the ADU on the top floor, and then we wind our way down those steps to the garage level, which is tucked in and buried. And all that will be well planted out, and it's right now got a lot of very native rhubarb, lemonade berry, and toyon, and small oaks that we hope to preserve in that whole area and just supplement. I think that gives us a recap of where I was jumping all around. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Not a problem. It's just,
So I have
the chocolate
4
wears
minutes
off.
left, so I'll try and go through the ADU a little bit in more detail. I did want to talk a little bit about the stair coming up to the ADU and this planter in front. The height of the planter, which you'll see on the elevations of the ADU, that's actually representing existing grade. So while we're kind of cutting down to create this back out area for the driveway, the planter along the front of that building kind of maintains that grade. And the idea of these stairs is to kind of, provide this pathway that essentially is at grade, a little bit above, a little bit below here, but kind of following that path up to the ADU. So, and I think, from this diagram, it's slightly misleading because even though this looks like, one big footprint, what you're actually seeing on this side, and you'll see when we pull up the floor plans, is that, we have a deck that's part of the first floor of the ADU. So these site sections are really helpful to kind of show the location of that pool and the deck, how it sits down from the existing main house, and then how the proposed ADU is kind of built into the hillside here and sits even farther below. So you're kind of looking over that structure.
I wanted to
From
point
the
out
main
real
house.
quickly too, to the downhill side of the ADU pull into the garage is really a landform. It's a mound that's existing, and there's oak trees on that. So you really are hidden by an existing landform as well as existing trees. So you really won't see that exposed into
Yeah,
the
you
city.
can kind of see that little berm right there. That's the existing grade. It kind of like dips down to this valley, which is where that clearing is when you were looking at those existing photos. So kind of like a low point right there. And then for the floor plans here, we have a single car garage with a small workshop stair going up to connect both levels of the ADU. Coming up to the first floor of the ADU with an open living area. And this is that deck out here. And what we really were trying to do with this is provide some open space for the occupants that's outdoors, since, this is a hillside lot and there aren't that many opportunities for flat, open area, especially in this portion of the site. The idea was to create, an indoor-outdoor living space for the occupants of this residence. And then on the other side of the building, as the stair comes up, we just have a single bedroom, which is also, the lower portion of the site here, it kind of slopes up a little bit more. And as we push back, the idea was to engage with the hillside here so that this upper level isn't really, you do see some portions of a 2-story structure here, but with the stepping of the site, the idea was to create a massing that from the backside primarily looked like a single-story structure, and even from the approach side. But on this side where we have ample landscaping buffer to the adjacent residences, this is a little bit more exposed, providing light for those bedrooms that are along that side. So you can kind of see here how, we do have this side of the building does look like a two-story, and then on the other side we have a single-story feel. Some sections through there, and then these are the elevations. So along the garage side, this is along the east side of the residence, and the maximum height we have here is about 22 feet 5, I think. So this is that backside where we have this is almost completely buried, and then this kind of sits up a little bit higher. And kind of what you see when you pull into that driveway area, with this being set significantly, far back from this front area. So I know sometimes elevations can be deceiving because you're seeing the whole thing at once when you're really not experiencing it that way. But some of these 3D views kind of give that feel of, having this lower element that's kind of set down into the landscape with the stair kind of coming over that. And then having the landscaping on the other side to kind of soften that edge between the neighboring properties.
You're out of time, Ms. Hughes,
yeah,
so if
no
you can wrap
problem.
it up, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so at this time, we will open this item to public comment from those in the gallery as well as those online who may want to speak. Mariah, please.
All right, thank you, Chair Colossus. I'll start with in-person public comment. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips. Just as a reminder, if you do wish to speak in person, you can fill out a speaker slip by the back door. I don't see anyone moving to speak, so I'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. If you wish to speak on Zoom at this time, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. I don't see any hands raised on Zoom, and we also did not receive any written correspondence for this item, so I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Colossus.
Thank you. So I'm going to open it up to questions from the board. Any questions? Anybody?
I just had one quick, are any trees being removed?
There are some trees that are being removed.
Okay, can you quickly, I know because we talked a lot about the ones that are staying. Can you just quickly touch on those locations, species, all of that,
Yeah.
and mitigation plan, if there is one?
So we don't have a mitigation plan right now, but we will have one as part of this project. There are 3 smaller oak trees that are being removed kind of in this central area here. This one is located where the drive court is, and these 3 are where the proposed ADU is located. We're preserving this large 24-inch oak tree, this smaller 6-inch, and then this smaller 4-inch on the other side. But there are 4 in the area of the ADU. I don't believe there's anything significant on the upper area, but Sam could kind of recap if
Yeah,
there's
as I
anything.
mentioned, there's a dense evergreen foliage along the north side, and then we do have beautiful oak trees on that lookout area. And then there's some small 5- and 4-inch oaks that are in the middle between the two that we'll hope to preserve. But we're not taking out any significant trees other than possibly, I think there's an ash tree that we might try to pull back or at least remove for some of our activity on the north side of the pool patio, but it's not an oak tree.
Okay, great. The cluster looking from the bottom of the cul-de-sac up that's in front of the ADU, I think you showed, but I just want to confirm that the plan is for that to remain.
That
Yes.
all remains, all those
Yeah,
big
and you can
trees.
kind of see that here on the
Yep.
survey. That's that cluster right
Okay.
there. And this is that driveway here. So we're actually showing, I believe, on our site plan, you can see the drip line for that oak there. We're kind of going around that
We'll study that CRZ and make sure that retaining wall that we're showing there is doing the right things for that oak tree, because we intend to preserve that.
Okay, great. That's all
Okay.
the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have just a couple of questions too. So really from the street view, you're, with that cluster of oaks there, you're really not seeing a whole lot at all. Uh-oh, there goes our monitor. At all of the ADU. Maybe just some roof.
It's concealed quite nicely, except for that south side or the lower side, which we'll be planting with that pathway goes up. But no, from looking at it from the cul-de-sac below or the other houses, it really is very, very discreet, and you can't really see this project site much.
Okay, and then just a clarification on the front setback mod, and then, because I'm not sure you pointed out the setback. I mean, it looks like it's out of the front setback to me.
So that's because the ADU is located in front of the main house,
Yeah,
correct?
just to clarify, they're
Right,
not
okay.
requesting a front setback modification. The accessory building, there's limitations for locating a accessory building in the front yard. So anything proud
Gotcha.
of their primary residence.
Okay. And then, I was originally looking at the ADU square footage going, how, I thought 1,200 was max, but it's really, the modification then is for the garage, which is the 674. And the ADU itself is 1,200 if you kind of classify it different, but, so the modification.
So through the chair, Commissioner, there's also a limitation for accessory buildings just generally for a single building to exceed 1,250 square feet for a singular building, and this building does exceed 1,250. The proposed accessory building, that's the garage, workshop, and ADU collectively.
Oh, okay, so it is the whole thing, like I thought. Okay, yeah, because overall, it's whatever it is. What is it, 2,200 feet or 2,100 square feet of an ADU?
I believe, and Ms. Hughes, I believe it's 1,870 square feet, the proposed accessory structure.
Okay. Okay, stand by, sorry. I just would like you to go over your heights of, because I think you were giving like some plate heights, but you were also giving finished grade heights, which is kind of confusing to have both and not, the same consistently, and then the plate heights.
Sure. So on the lower level, the garage is a little bit less than 10 feet plate height here. I think we have about 9'8". The reasoning for that was originally we had the garage finished floor slightly higher than this. And in working with transportation about the slopes of the driveway access, that's kind of what ended up determining the finished floor level of this garage, just being able to get there. And then the finished floor of the ADU, if you look over here, the whole idea was to connect with that pathway at grade without having to, do much grading outside of the building footprint. So this point right here at the corner is basically what determined the finished floor of the ADU. Then we have essentially a 9-foot plate height on the first floor, which in reality will probably be more like 8'8", and then on the second floor we have an 8-foot plate height.
Okay, I'm not sure I get that whole transportation conversation. That's one of the ways to reduce the height, but I'll trust that you've gone through it and that was the recommendation. I believe those are my only questions. Thank you.
Ms. Lewis, do you have any questions? Okay. So I'm a little bit confused here because we've got, perhaps it didn't mean to say 320 feet for top of plate 2.
Oh, that's probably from,
Was that 20 feet?
that's probably a sea level height there, so.
So this is what it's making it difficult for us to ascertain plate heights?
Yeah,
Okay, so you've got 9,
it's,
and then you're saying 8, and then you're 4.5. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't see the dimensions strong. I was just looking at the elevations.
sure.
Okay. And so you're just trying to find that magic spot between where transportation has set you and where you kind of match existing grade in terms of the actual plate height there for that,
Yeah.
the basement level or the garage
Mhm.
level. Okay. Go back to the pool for a second. Mr. Mavis noted there'd be a 5-foot drop for the infinity edge on the pool. Do we have an idea of what that material be that would be exposed?
Yeah, the actual wall would either be a PebbleTech or a tile. I would imagine it would be some type of tile that could take the exposure of being wet and dry, because the infinity spill would not be working but a portion of the day or during demand, so it would be off most of the time. So we could keep that tile very earth tone and subtle. It's not meant to be an art statement on that side. It's going to probably blend in more with the color of water or the color of the sandstone boulder walls to the north and south of that. So the intent is to be really kind of tying into the natural setting.
Okay. So as your site plan is oriented on the sheet, I don't have many concerns of somebody seeing this from, I'll call it the northeast, but I wonder if we're going to end up seeing this from the northwest, if I'm doing my ordinal directions properly. When I drove up to this, you really can't see much from the cul-de-sac, but I was having a photo. Sometimes I look at my phone because I have photos of things I've gone and looked at. So when I got down to the corner of Calle del Sol and Calle Cerrito, and I looked back up in that direction, I saw this. I'm wondering if you can tell me what home that is so that I have an understanding of where that is relative to the parcel.
Okay.
Could that be one that's on the
It looks like it's the one, is this the one next door?
Well, I thought it was, but
No.
but it's not because the fenestration is different.
Yeah, okay, let me see about,
Does this help at all, kind of as a Google Earth? Those are the cul-de-sac homes.
oh, you know what? I think here it is. I think this is it. This one that's set pretty far back
that
from
would
the
be it.
street.
That
That
would
kind
be
of looks like it.
That might be out on the point of the ridge that
Yeah.
might project it up in the air. Yeah.
So, yeah, when we,
That driveway cuts off right there.
It's this one?
it's, yeah, it looks like it's
Further
this
out than that
one
one.
that's opposite.
On this side towards me is just a valley. It actually drops down and there's a big canyon full of oak trees. As you can see, all the green at the top of the screen on the monitor. There's really no homes looking across at it.
Were you looking from here? Is that the spot, or?
I think I may have been down to the
Or-
next, it was either that cross street or the next one
Okay.
down.
Maybe Flora Vista,
No, it was not Flora
not
Vista.
that far, okay. But those are right on the edge of the ridge, so you're seeing quite a bit of house pop up there on that.
Yeah, so you're much further back. But my concern would be this vantage point as opposed to the northeasterly vantage point, where you're clearly going to be screened with that grove of trees.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see from this aerial view pretty well all of the trees that are kind of screening before you even get up to that cul-de-sac. So if, you're on the street driving towards the property, there's a whole row of very dense
The
trees.
site is 2 acres, and it's really, the construction is in the middle portion of the majority of a lot of grand-sized trees. on both
So you don't
sides.
you don't anticipate any effect on the, I'll call it the west side of the driveway in terms
No.
of foliage?
Too steep. That's really going to
Okay.
be an area we stay away from. It's very, very dense, and it's going to stay dense.
Okay.
We're going to poke some holes around those oak trees for a lookout, but it won't be anything that will be a constructed, built item that will be seen. It'll just be a walkway, sitting area.
Okay, I think those were my only questions. So we'll open it up for comments from the board. Ms. Lewis, would you like to start?
Sure, I think it's a great project. I love this whole space, and the outdoor landscaping is great. I think you worked really well with the site context and the grading. I'm not concerned at all about the bulk or scale. I think it's very compatible. You know, one of the requirements for the ADU is wanting it to correspond with the main house, and I think that you've done that, and staying with the same language. And I'm not concerned with it being in the front yard. It's such a unique property that it's not really, you know, the front yard in the way that the guidelines are set in place, and the concern there. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the things that you're going to need for your neighborhood compatibility, but I think that it's a really great project, and looking forward to seeing the details, especially, you know, some of the items that they've already discussed of how you're screening around some of the pool and some of the areas that start to lift up as you come down the grade. I want to thank you. All the visuals are very helpful. The colorized views, and especially the aerial view of the site, I think is really helpful in understanding the context.
I'm going to ask maybe that the board members, as they make their comments, so I'm going to ask you if you would do this before we go on to the next person, Ms. Lewis. If you would speak to whether you would be comfortable moving this on to the staff hearing officer with positive comments at this time, or whether you think that you need supplemental materials in order to be able to make comments for that purpose. Whether you would need to see it returned to the board. I think it'll help us in terms of figuring out where we're going out from a motion standpoint.
I'm comfortable with going to the staff hearing officer with comments and then coming back for materials. I don't think that in what the staff hearing is going to review for the zoning modifications that we'll have any, that I have any changes for that. It'll just be review of materials and things afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Graffitti?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great project. I'm really excited for all the outdoor space and design. And I'm in support of the zoning mods that you're asking for. I would even be open for it to return to consent post-staff hearing officer, but just throwing it out there. So yeah, no further comments.
Ms. Anderson?
I as well am in support of the project and support the modifications. And I don't have any further add-on comments.
Okay. I think we're all on the same page. I mean, at some point, we're going to need to see, I think it should come back to the full board. I would prefer to see it come back to the full board with, you know, developed mitigation plan related to oaks that are being removed. There's going to be some stormwater stuff that's going on, some other things. So I think it would be helpful for us to see it one more time before it, not before it goes to the staff hearing officer, but before it,
After the final.
exactly, once you're through the staff hearing officer process. But I think it's a good project, and I think it's going to be well screened, given the fact that you have the amount of existing canopy on the property.
A lot of land
So,
up there,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And I agree with Ms. Lewis, the outdoor space is somewhere that we would all like to go and have a big party at, so.
That's why this one's fun. You're right.
It's always fun, right, exactly. Okay, so would anybody care to make a motion? We would be moving this on with comments, positive comments, presumably, to the staff hearing officer related to aesthetics, the front yard setbacks, the increase in square footage over typically allowed parking, and I think there was one more.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair Kloss. So just to reiterate, aesthetic appropriateness comments on the location of the building in the front yard and for increased square footage of garage floor area on the property and accessory building floor area on the property for that single building.
I move to continue this project to the staff hearing officer with the following positive comments and a return to the full board for project design approval. The overall board is in support of the design of the project. The style of architecture of the ADU coordinates well with the main house. The siding is respectful of the grade, both in the landscape components and the ADU. The board is in support of additional garage square footage for the ADU, especially considering the large site scale of the site. And the board is in support of the ADU in the front yard, given the scale of the site and the screening of landscaping and screening any visibility from the main cul-de-sac. The board looks forward to seeing, more information on the trees and the materials, especially in regards to site walls around the pool and some of the outdoor spaces, and understanding stormwater management at the next hearing.
I'll second that motion. If we can have a roll call, please.
Okay, Chair Kloss,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Board Member Graffitti,
Yes.
Board Member Lewis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to take a 5-minute recess before we take the next item. So we will return at, am I doing math here, 45, 10 till 5 p.m. Until then, we are recessed. going to reconvene the Single Family Design Board hearing for August 28th. And the next item on the agenda is item 3, 817 Spring Street. This is a continued item here for concept review. The proposal is to demolish an existing 187 square foot detached garage associated with an existing one-story 790 square foot single unit residence and construct a detached accessory building comprised of 1,000 square feet of a two-story accessory dwelling unit and a 300 square foot workshop. The project also involves removal of landscape walls, regrading of the rear yard, and new landscaping and hardscaping. The proposed total of 2,090 square feet of development on a 5,041 square foot lot is 85% of the maximum guideline floor to lot area ratio. So this is similar to the other project that we saw on item 1 today, in that this is a guideline floor to lot area ratio because this is an R2 lot. No final appealable decision will take place at this hearing. Neighborhood preservation findings would be required for project design approval. And the project was last reviewed on September 20th of 2022. So,
Chair Kalass, board members, just a brief comment about this project. It is here for a second conceptual review today, so hoping to move forward after this hearing. And just want to mention that the applicant has provided responses to the previous meeting minutes. You'll see that in their presentation. There's additional neighborhood context. And I also noted that they took into consideration the materials, so you'll see those proposed changes as well. Thank you.
okay. Thank you very much. So if you could introduce yourselves and your project, and we would be very interested in, yes, exactly, you pulling those up and running right through those for us. That would be very helpful.
Of course, thank you. I'm Ken Vermillion with Bilston Architecture and Planning.
Ellen Bilston, excuse me. Ellen Bilston Architecture and Planning.
And to my left, we have the owners of the property, Lori and George. And they wanted to say something first.
I'm George. We wanted to just take the opportunity to reintroduce ourselves and provide a little background and context for our plans for the property and our connection to the neighborhood. I've lived in the neighborhood and within actually 3 blocks of the house for the last 10 years. And Lori's lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. So we feel a part of the neighborhood. We feel a part of the community. We have a lot of friends that are neighbors, and so we care sort of what happens on the street. And also, since we've owned the house, which hasn't been that long, but since we've, as time and money is allowed, we've put a fair amount of work into deferred maintenance and kind of beautifying the exterior of the property. And I think we've gotten a lot of comments from neighbors saying that it looks better than it has in a long time. So we feel good about that.
All right. I guess my name's Lori, and our plan for the property has been the same since when we bought it with George's dad almost a couple of years ago, and that is for it to be a place for us to have secure housing for us and our extended family. It is definitely not intended as an income-generating property, but for our family, and we've designed the ADU with Bilston Architects for us and our 3-year-old son. And then, since there is the 790 square foot home already there, we are inviting and hoping that our family, my sister and brother-in-law, who are both teachers in town, can live there. So we can help continue them staying in the area as well, which is important to us. And as he mentioned, we've both been in the neighborhood for a really long time, and we think that our changes since we were last here will show that we want to continue to fit in and be a part of it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So the things that we were trying to address, and we took a long time to do this, and we walked the neighborhood, and we looked at a lot of buildings, and you'll see a lot of photography of those things that we think we're referencing quite nicely. The second story, as you can see, comment 1 was not a problem. You'll see from the street view that the second story is actually quite hard to see behind the large tree and the building in the front. And so really at issue was the design style of the proposed building in the back of the property. Again, it's as far back on the property as possible. There is a small workshop on the lower level as well. It's not a garage. It will not allow cars to get back to that area of the property. There will be a gate that stops the cars on the driveway that's alongside the existing house. So that's not the purpose. It's a real workshop area, accessory structure. And then you'll see the two-story ADU goes up and around it, and the client's appreciation of a simple parapet-style flat roof structure, in our opinion, was the easiest way to keep it under the solar height limitation, and you'll see those in the elevations. And so we made a number of material changes on this round, and like I said, looked at lots of other buildings and things in the area. And there's one thing that we know about this neighborhood, as anybody's spent any time up and down these blocks, it's quite eclectic. And so at the request of the board, we put together this survey of the following streets. So not only our street, but the blue rectangle are the houses and the addresses that we studied. You can see the subject property at the red flag on the south side of Spring Street. So we documented all of those houses on that block, the across the street side of Spring Street, and then the whole north side or south side of Aliso Street as well, and a couple of houses that face De La Guerra and have De La Guerra addresses, and a couple that face East Cannon Perdido. And so we determined that a lot of them, one of which is commercial and quite boxy. There's one 3-story modern international style, if you will, house 2 doors down from the subject property. And then most of them were built in the 50s, post-war bungalow-themed, cottage-themed, Spanish-themed, nothing that would qualify as, truly traditional Spanish or truly traditional bungalow or craftsman by any means, but again, very eclectic neighborhood. We've got a range of neighboring properties here that we're just highlighting to show the different styles, and that, even though it's a Spanish-looking style, it's not quite fully Spanish. That's one on Cannon Perdido Street, a 2-story on Spring. Kind of all over the map in terms of look and style. Definitely some flat roofs, parapets, number of 2 stories. There's a single-story front building with a 2-story back building, very similar to what we're going for. Another one with an original house you can see what remained in front with a 2-story addition in the back. Ours is by no means that large, so what did we do stylistically in a change from the last design? So as we said, we walked along many streets of the neighborhood. We looked at some of the old traditional buildings in town, the Presidio building, and really looked at materiality. We looked at a newer apartment complex in town, and we gathered a few materials, which is the mottled plaster look, which is found all over town. And then the other base material is a plastered over brick veneer that's found on the Presidio building itself. And then as an homage to some terracotta details, we added this flat terracotta tile top to the parapets. And we didn't want to do, again, the sloping roofs because that got us in trouble with the height for the solar height ordinance. So this would be the massing of the building as it faces the street and the front house. You can see the inclusion of a wood trellis with some sloping beams, some canvas fabric shades to provide shading for the main deck on the second level. The whole accessory building portion, the workshop, is all clad in the plastered brick with a light color paint. We're imagining these are all in the light whitish color realms. The windows would be dark anodized to match the dark wood of the trellis. And then another thing we picked up was these tile overflow inserts on the parapets, which is similar to the Meridian building over on De La Guerra. And then the majority of the building would be this mottled textured plaster. So that's an accurate representation along with an existing photo of the house from the street. That's the height of the two-story ADU in the back. There's a very large tree in the front, as shown in the model view as well. And then here's our elevations where you see the very extreme solar height ordinance come into play. So the lower massing level is the bedrooms and bathroom for the upper level unit, and then the main dining, living, kitchen is the larger volume on the left on the front elevation. And there you can see the rear showing the brick veneered bottom element with the mottled plaster rest of the ADU going up and over that piece. There is a breezeway between the two. That's where you enter each building, in addition to the workshop doors that face the driveway, the front of the house. But there's a protected entryway there that's, again, not meant for parking or any other use than outdoor dining or sitting or reading or the like. And so you can see all the parapets capped with the terracotta detail. You can see the overflow drain detailing in each side. And yeah, again, the 3D version of it as it appears. Obviously behind the property is a commercial zone. Those are commercial buildings in the back. And here we can see the plan. So you've got the small workshop in blue. Then you've got a single bedroom suite down below with a stair that wraps around to the upper level that has one bedroom, an office, and then the great room area with the deck on the front. For the protection of that, all the side viewing windows are 42-inch high sills or greater. And then for the balcony on the front, we did an 8-foot high screen wall there. So instead of the 5-foot high requirement to keep overlooking neighbors' properties, we went with the full height screen wall there to protect that neighbor's views. Roof plan with the existing house in front. You can see we've placed it as far back as possible. And since we are creating a gate here for cars to park in the driveway, only uncovered is required for this property, we can just make the outdoor open space, open yard area per the city's guidelines work, which would be the orange rectangle, L-shaped rectangle there. This is just a diagram showing how we calculated the solar height. That's not under contest here at all. And then these were the existing street views of a wide array of building styles. And we would say 2 doors down is this large 3-story flat-roofed boxy structure next to the commercial structure on the corner. And this is the subject property with the existing house. It's been fixed up dramatically since these photos were taken. And this you can see the garage and back, and these retaining walls. We're dropping the site down to lower the building as much as possible, so it will be essentially on the same finished floor level as the existing residence. And I think that's pretty much it.
One thing I just wanted to add to what Ken said is that the location of the new structure is 20 feet away from the back end of the primary house, just for your consideration.
And all of that space, like we said, in the open space is meant to remain open, usable outdoor space for both the house and the ADU.
Okay. You have a minute and a half left, just for the record. We'll make sure you know that in case you have anything to add. And we will open this item for public comment before we move on to questions.
All right, thank you, Chair Collas. I'll go ahead and start with in-person public comment. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips, and just as a reminder, if you do wish to speak in person, you can fill out a speaker slip by the back door. I don't see anyone moving to speak, so I'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. If you wish to speak on Zoom at this time, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. I don't see any hands raised on Zoom, and we also did not receive any written correspondence for this item, so I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Collas.
Thank you. Okay, so questions from the board. Would anybody like to start? Well, let me ask everybody on the board. Did everybody review the previous minutes and drawings and?
Yes, watch the video.
Okay, great. Okay, so please, if you have any questions.
The first question I have, the balcony that you have on the side yard, it appears from Google Maps that that's looking over a garage. Is that right for the neighboring property?
There is no usable balcony there. The number 10, is that what you're referring to here?
Yes.
That's a roof. So we could not do that as a balcony, so we just made it strictly a
Thanks.
roof.
Okay. Second question, are there any plans to do any modifications to the gate that leads to the ADU on the side of the existing house?
Well, the gate that's on the existing house is at the front of the house.
Correct.
And
Pardon my interruption. Can you turn on the microphone, please, and speak into the mic?
the existing gate is in the front of the house, and I think the proposed gate is at the back of that house. So, yeah, that would be.
So you'll be removing the existing gate?
Removing
and
the
doing
existing gate,
proposed.
yes.
And then, did I miss, or are there elevations of that gate?
There are no elevations to that gate. It can't be more than 42 inches. We believe we would keep it low. It's just meant to be a barrier for automobiles to ensure that cars cannot access the back part.
Okay. And this may be somewhat tied, but if you could talk a little bit more about the transition in styles through the site and ways that some of the site development may be helping to make that transition or not.
The overall design concept was more akin to Irving Gill or that style of architecture, which was what we set out to do in the beginning. So there's some historical significance to that type of architecture, but certainly it also plays into a parapet solution. We started looking at all those buildings around town and seeing this treatment with this terracotta tile edge, so we decided to add that. We decided to do full brick veneer on the lower workshop building to kind of, evoke that kind of look. And so what other smaller details could we do to take it into a slightly Spanish-looking solution that would be a little less international style than the original design. At the same time, again, maintaining one large open space and with clear story windows for the living, dining, manning space without having a vaulted, ceiling. And in this case, the existing house doesn't have a tile roof, so we didn't see a need to go that route. So we thought that introducing the terracotta and the parapet detail would address maybe a little bit of a nod to that architecture without having to go fully to that design style.
I think the other thing to add is just the survey that we did of walking through the neighborhood and finding other precedents for styles that wasn't necessarily the same as the existing house. And it being 20 feet away, our understanding is that it can be more of the neighborhood, perhaps, than the house itself. So I think those references that we provided were kind of the direction that we were going and making it a traditional-looking structure.
Yeah, I think, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to add one more thing. I don't know if it's important, but the language of the ordinance when we began was different than what the guidance is now about matching. I think back then it was matching the neighborhood, not having to match the front house.
Yeah, I think that that's something that was clear in the minutes before of, the architectural style matching the neighborhood, which I think it does. I think what I think would be helpful and what I'm trying to get at with the question is looking at the site holistically, which I think that you guys have done, and then understanding maybe a little bit more of what happens in that open yard or maybe the gate transition of how the site works together to help make that transition, or maybe it is simply that it is pushed at the back and that's a different almost entity and property, but it shares the same property, and trying to understand what the concept is there, I think would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. The other thing to keep in mind is that the back of this property is backed to the commercial buildings beyond that go along Milpas. So in that sense, there's also a reference in that direction, not necessarily completely within itself as though there wasn't that context right behind. So we're seeing that building backed by these other structures along Milpas.
Good. Okay, that's it for now.
Ms. Anderson?
Hi. So yeah, we're used to seeing compatible design style for the ADUs with the main residence, and also used to seeing the ADUs smaller than the main residence. So those are the two things that I kind of struggle with what you've submitted. And we originally reviewed it with the same kind of comments, and you're coming back to us with the same kind of proposal. So I guess if you can show again the photos that you're talking about where it would show two separate units on a piece of property that are different design styles would be helpful.
Yeah, and I don't think we're trying to, no one had an objection to the height of the structure, right, or the size of it necessarily. We're within the size. It's just that we have a very small front house, true. So we certainly acknowledge that. And it's here's a Spanish with a more traditional gable roof to the back. This is an R2 neighborhood, and it is quite different. And there are so many different styles. Yeah, I wouldn't say that this back building was in the same style as this front building. Again, you're talking about a one-story versus a two-story structure. It comes
But
down
the
to
colors and all the detailing is the same as the front structure primarily.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't see this detailing of this roof anywhere like that one. That's just a much more stripped down version with hips. This is all single gables. There are a lot of different subtleties here, of course. And in this case, you know, it's a preference with the client and really trying to find out why this is here. Okay. And then this is a more contemporary back building than the front building. That was an original structure. I think that's, yeah, they have a preference for, you know, this other look, and how could we achieve that look and still, you know, appease this a little more stripped down version of a Spanish style in the textures and materials and the very few details that we've chosen.
Okay, thank you. And then, I mean, to planning, Holly, so because it's right at that 20 feet, in the compatibility checklist for ADUs, that's how none of the above is checked, but
Yeah.
there's also the 2-story item.
Yeah, so great question. It's not required to match the primary existing residence. That's why they've chosen the discretionary process. And the ADU is 2-story, so that's also a trigger for design review here. Versus the primary residence is 1-story.
Okay, thank you. And can you go over the plate heights too?
Sure.
Again, because the garage, I think, is 9'6" or 10 foot. So if you're struggling with height, I kind of question why you wouldn't maybe drop the garage down.
Yeah, the only way we struggle with height is this half on the. Well, let me pan. Doesn't let me pan. Oh, that's good. This guy.
Maybe make it smaller.
Oops.
Just hit that and make it.
What's that? Oh, I want to make it bigger, so.
The screen is also touchscreen.
Oh,
So,
well, that's good.
yeah.
Okay, well, there we go. So it's the east side here that we're really tight on, and those are very short. There's a 10-foot, but that's to the finished floor from the lower workshop, and the workshop is 6 inches lower than the residence, the bedroom suite down on the bottom. So that's 9 foot at best. So the bottom floor is like 8'6" probably by the time we get the framing in there. And then the upper is as big as we can go, which is not much more for the top of plate on that one. And I probably have that. And I scroll. That's the side elevation facing east. So then I should be able to do this. But I can't change. Oh, there we go. So yeah, there you can see the stepping in the levels and the 42 cell. That's the other side elevation on the west. We call it the west, but it's really the northwest. So you can see minimal plate heights for that whole side on the northwest. But yes, we do go for a little more clear story height on the main living space, and that's 24/6 in a realm of 30 that's allowed.
Right, so you're like 10-foot ceiling on the one lower side and then 14 on the other?
No, it's 8'6" on the lowest level. It's probably not much more than 8 on the upper level on the low side. On the top, it's more like 10, 11, I believe, is what we're trying to get clear.
Okay, all right. Did you consider colors, or you're like strictly, no, we're going modern, international, and that's what we want, and we're not looking at all at the bungalow blue, any
No,
of
the
that detailing?
bungalow's been repainted actually now in a similar light color, right? With white trim. We were going for the more Spanish look with the plastered brick and the white mottled plaster, but it could be warm white, it could be off gray white, perhaps, light gray. Color's not out of the question at all for us. But we'd like it to go with the dark browns of the windows and doors and the trellis and the little bit of terracotta accents. I mean, it's traditional for the plastered brick to be in the white realm.
Right. Okay, and you don't have any pictures of the back commercial and what the ADU is exposed with that, just for further context, and or that front kind of gate, because that can screen, the view and
There's a
or
tall
concept,
metal
so-
shed.
Right, it's
like
very
a
commercial.
two-story metal shed that's
behind you?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
mechanic
Let's
shop.
see if we can show you what's on there in the aerial, but
It showed up in one of the pictures.
It's the guy who does the really cool four-wheel drive work. I used to drive by and see the Land Cruisers there and drool over them.
so yeah, directly behind is a couple of buildings on this site with a parking lot. And there's tall trees on the property line as well, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Scarfidi.
Oh, I actually had just a clarifying question for staff. So, and I'm just familiarizing myself with this part of the guidelines, with the 20-foot guideline, I guess, if it's 20 feet away from the main residence of the ADU is. My question is, if it were a single story or didn't have some of these other elements of review, would it trigger a review hearing despite the fact that they didn't match? Do you understand what I'm getting at? I did not
I know what you're
articulate that
getting
properly.
at, Board Member Garfeiti. So hypothetically, if you had the existing one-story residence and you proposed an existing one-story ADU or accessory building, that's a technicality, but accessory dwelling unit, and if it's more than 20 feet away, one of the ministerial design criteria on the checklist is it doesn't need to be compatible if it's more than 20 feet away. If it's closer than 20 feet to the existing primary residence, it needs to be compatible if you'd like to stay in the ministerial process.
Okay. And we're slightly over 20 feet? We're at,
They're at
exactly.
20, but they're proposing a two-story
Correct.
situation.
yes.
So just for
But that's a design review
clarification,
trigger.
the review criteria verbiage in item 11A is as follows. A detached ADU is located within 20 feet of the primary residential unit. That means if you are less than 20 feet, if you are 20 feet or greater, that is not a box that gets checked.
And if I can, I mean, we did start this project being 20 feet away and thinking we would be okay trying a different version of a style than the main house. It's only because the ordinance changed and it was rewritten that we sat down and talked about, do we really want to make wholesale changes, or do we want to make things more like some of the other buildings in the neighborhood, which were the mottled plaster, textured plaster with the brick veneer, the small details with terracotta and the vents through the upper parapets and the new wood trellis. Those were things that we really wanted to pursue and go ahead and expose ourselves back to the board again and say, is this something that could be supported by this body in this case?
Okay, thank you. And I'm trying to make sure I'm staying on the question portion. More of my questions are actually around how the two relate versus actually neighborhood context. So I just wanted to better understand, again, the guideline there. And I was going to ask if there were any intentions to change potentially the front house, but it sounds like you just recently painted it and siding and everything, so that I'm assuming there's probably not an intention to change that, given you just upgraded. Okay. It for my questions for now. I'll pass it to another board member.
Okay. So I have a question for the owners. You guys have lived in this neighborhood for 10 and 15 years. You bought this little tiny house. And if you were anything like me, you probably scraped everything you could together to buy this little tiny house that was more expensive than it should have been. I did the same thing in this same area of town. I totally get it. And so now you're trying to do something where maybe you create a multifamily compound, for lack of a better way of putting it, which is awesome. What drove you in the direction of the aesthetics that we're seeing here? Why did you decide you wanted this instead of something that looked like the existing house, or that looked more like something in the neighborhood that you've lived in for 10 and 15 years and seem to like?
Speak to it.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, part of the reason is because George actually has built houses and is a carpenter and did framing and finishing for a long time. And the home that I've been renting for 15 years actually looks quite similar to this, except they had the tile roof put on because it's from the 30s. So he's wanted to build a house. We both wanted to have it, and have the lines also be kind of just straightforward. And do you want to speak to the building part as well? When you talk about scraping it together, George was doing the renovations, and he's going to be the one who will be leading building this as well. So we're definitely keeping costs in mind and what's available in building materials and construction. But you could speak to more.
Yeah, I think initially it was also wanting to maximize the volumes, putting on a pitched roof, and simplicity of building, budget-wise. Building a box is easier than building pitched roofs. You can get more space in the interior at the same height. And we have 1,000 square feet to work with. So it's good, but it's not a ton. We really liked the preserving the breezeway open space. I know it doesn't count as open space, but because we're putting another building in the yard, it's nice to try and keep as much yard as we could. So we really liked having that additional sort of outdoor area. Yeah, and then, budget-wise, it's expensive to do a complete redesign. Like, if we have to do a complete redesign, we're probably not going to be able to build it. So what we were hoping to do is listen to what, we were going in initially not knowing exactly the process and not knowing what the board would think about it. And then afterwards, taking those items and trying to do the best we could for the, biggest bang for our buck to kind of go towards all the comments that you guys had. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
I think it helps. I think some of the questions that Ms. Lewis was asking and that I've been asking myself in my mind is, how do we tell a story? How does this property tell a story, right? Because when we look at these multi-generational parcels in this part of town, and I had one that I was going to develop and I didn't because I couldn't afford to, and the couple that were up the street from me, you know, it was the little house in the front, and then they built the big box on the back that became the 2 or 3 units for the uncle or the aunt or the cousin or the grandparent. But in those cases, they all talk to each other. They all look similar. I mean, even if the detailing isn't quite as nice as the original home, there's sort of an effort that's been made, the colors match, things of that nature. So this is a complete divergence from that in terms of like the architectural vocabularies talking to each other. So I'm starting to try to create some sort of narrative in my mind where I can like sell myself on this, frankly.
Yeah.
And I'm going, okay, well, we've got it, we back up to commercial property on Milpa Street, okay, and what building is that existing? Well, okay, it's an existing mechanic shop, and now we have like this workshop that's downstairs inside of this building, and then we have this cute little, like, I want to call it like grandma's house that's on Spring Street. And so maybe, you know, maybe the story that we, you know, post-rationalize this with is, well, you know, this really used to be part of the commercial property on Milpas, and Granny lived in the back on Spring Street, and, you know, the 2 brothers. I'm trying to figure out a way to rationalize this in my mind in terms of the divergence of the architecture. And I think that's what Ms. Lewis is talking about too, is how can we, like, is the gate, is the landscaping, like, how do these things help weave this together? The colors, how does it start to become a meaningful, holistic development as opposed to 2 things that just feel very discordant?
Sure.
Even though this does start to talk to the neighborhood. It's almost like, well, this starts talking to the neighborhood, but then the original house is like the ugly stepchild now. So how do we make that work architecturally and aesthetically? And you look like you want to jump in here, so I'm going to let you jump in.
I have another question, which is the zoning, theoretically, and part of why we're not, you know, at Mexican really for the FAR is that, like, you could have had 2 separate developments here. And I think, you know, part of this is it's not like a garden house. It's not, maybe we're getting more into comments than we are to questions, but they are going to be used as 2 separate entities. And so it really is like a front yard house and a backyard that you have a shared easement of access to, which then helps kind of defend this, you know, 2 different architectural languages. And like you said, you know, the back one speaking a language to what it's closest to, and the front one being separate. So you know, on one hand, I had wanted the gate to speak to helping combine them, but now I'm wondering actually, like, if the gate's part of this language with the front house, and then you come in the back as its own separate thing, the 20 feet helps it be different. Visually, it looks like it's in its own property behind, like what happens a lot in the Mesa where you have an inner property division behind another house. So that's kind of what I think is helpful of having these 2 separate things. It's going to be 2 separate families. It's not, and I think given the scale, it's not like a large house with a small little one in the back or small, you know, they are kind of 2 different. That's so, yeah, this is back to comments, but anyway, there you go.
Yeah.
And just to speak to what you said, I mean, we would like to tell the story. We'd like to develop the story more. I mean, I think we're here to see if we can kind of continue and hear more comments and go forward.
The struggle is that it's not my narrative to tell. It's yours, and it's your architect's narrative. That's what we're here to listen to.
Right.
And so okay, we'll just kind of shelf that for a second. So, I had a couple more questions. So, plaster, terracotta flat tile on the parapets, you've got your little vent or overflow scupper details. Can you talk to me about the nature of the fenestration and how you think that aligns itself with this more traditional architecture in the neighborhood and in the city that you are trying to use as an archetype?
Sure. They're simple punched openings, and so we looked at it as, when you think about energy efficient windows now and what's required for Title 24, it's a wood window with an aluminum cladding. Now that aluminum cladding could be painted any color or be any style of anodized aluminum in this case. We're choosing a color so it doesn't look like metal. From the inside it's actually wood, and that's an economical window unit that's dual glazed that gets you the energy compliance without going fully traditional type wood or steel, which would match more with the style.
I think I'm speaking more about the orientation, the breakups, the locations where these are being placed. They start talking more to an international style than they do an Irving Gill or a Pueblo style as I'm reading them, and that's what I'm asking you to speak to.
Placements themselves, we tried to stack openings. You'll see in the front there, they're stacked, but oftentimes throughout the elevations, they are single apertures within the elevation. On the east elevation, southeast elevation here, we've got one that's in the kitchen with a 42-inch sill, so there can be light coming in, and there could be a slight view out. And then in the living room, we chose a long, skinny horizontal window as a ventilation window and just bringing daylight in without looking over and looking into their living space. There are very few openings. The main opening is actually once you come up the stairs on the second level that looks out over the commercial properties. But there's some screening there with landscape. We're going to add vines around the base layer of the brick, but these are very small punctures here and there, which is a more traditional look. We're not putting tons of glass everywhere and trying to make this look super contemporary. They're functionally located. You can see the clear story on the northwest view for the living space to get natural light in. And then there's just a bathroom window and a small bedroom window that would be seen on the upper level. So they're minimal apertures for really the functionality of the spaces without trying to draw too much attention to themselves as a stylistic element, I think is.
Okay, and then my last question is, in plan view, you have a skewed wall that faces north, which is a relatively modern element. And can you explain what's driving that as opposed to a more rectilinear condition that we would imagine maybe in a more
Absolutely,
stripped-down Pueblo?
a very functional subtlety. So we can start with the site plan. This is the open area that is required, and we just make it. There is a small 3-foot overhang here, which is akin to a roof overhang, and so we got acceptance of that, and we believe that's the right way to read it. So when it came to the upper level, we wanted a functional space to have a real dining table for 6 people or so, and still get the area inside for the living space. So we sacrificed some living space room here to gain a little bit of dining space here, and that was the reason for that. But I will say the main reason for looking at that was the views and their proximity. The view looking at that portion of the Riviera just slightly off of straight over the existing house was something we felt was important, so that it didn't address itself clearly to the street and the building in front, but slightly off angle and looking at the curve of the Riviera.
Okay. And the plate height is generally 10 feet on the second floor, but you are at a higher plate height in the area of the main living space. Is that right? Am I reading that
The
right?
main living space is higher than 10, but the lowest living space, these are both 8.6 max for plate heights. There's a little bit of parapet here and roof, and then we're at our maximum allowed height. I mean, I'll say with gable roofs, obviously, when you incorporate gable roofs on here, you would have a larger pitch here and a taller building on this lower level. We're just deciding that we like the flat roof fundamentally, and so we're capping it at that most extreme lowest level. And yeah, I mean, the style is just a way of how the massing is generated with it coming up and over a workshop. That's a different use. And feeling like that's a responsible architectural handling of this unique building with this recessed on all sides workshop sitting below it and this breezeway creation of the space in between.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to comments.
Can I copy and paste mine over here? I feel like they were all comments, but yeah, I'll just reiterate or summarize that I think that the space between them and the compact area of the neighborhood, that I can get behind two different styles and understanding these as potentially conceptually two different properties, even though it's one property. I do think that there's not a very overarching architectural style to the neighborhood. There is a lot of variety in that space. And so I think that it is okay to have more variety here. And I think there's significant screening from the main house, the landscape, the large tree, that you're just seeing a portion of this building significantly beyond at the furthest part of the property. I would like to see at the next step, the gate condition, basically looking at the materials in that perspective that you have and really understanding how the two relate. I did a quick overlay, and I think that you're really only seeing from the street side the garage and that living space above. And so how does that relate back to the main house and really studying that view? Because the part beyond it, you're not ever going to see from the street and from the public side. I think as far as massing, I think we already discussed in the first or concept review that the overall scale is appropriate. And I'm not concerned with any privacy for the other neighbors, especially given their uses. That's my general comments.
Ms. Graffitti?
I agree with a lot of what Board Member Lewis mentioned. I don't have any challenge with the actual style itself. I think the neighborhood is eclectic and I think could warrant a lot of wide range of styles. I think more where I'm trying to understand it all is how the two relate. And I think I'm almost like it needs to be completely separate and not trying to tie it together, or it would have to come a lot more to tie together. Even in the photos we reference, which are in more context of the neighborhood, sure, maybe not every material and every piece of it is the same from the front to the back, but typically the exterior, the color, the textures, like there's a lot that if you didn't stop to look, it would read as the same architectural style to me. And I'm not an architect, but that based on like the photos that you mentioned, but going back to what I was saying, I still think I could get on board, and we're at concept, but I think I could be in support seeing more detailing of the gate. And again, that's where I'm torn is I almost don't necessarily want it to try to start reading because I think it's so to the front house because I think it's so different. It'd be hard for me to visualize how that would actually play out, to be honest. So I'm more in the camp of if it's not gonna be similar, we need to actually almost make it read separately. But I think I could get on board to support the project. Would just want to see some more of those details. And I want to say as well, I know it's a challenge because it is a different board too than probably last review, or at least a few of us. I I do appreciate you, though, sharing the background and your intentions and all of that. I think it is helpful to understand kind of why we're seeing the design that we're seeing today, and kind of helps me rationalize this, for lack of a better word.
Ms. Anderson?
So I'm struggling with the design compatibility that we have to make as a finding for our projects with the complete diversion styles. I feel like it's not compatible. In that way, I feel the scale, of the single story along with the two-story is not ideal. I understand, the whys around it. I understand the whys around maximizing the heights. But for me, I can't get behind compatibility, which is one of our number 2 item that we have to make as a finding. What else? We reviewed the project. You came back with the same submittal. We made the same comments the first time. And I'm not sure that there was, to me, I don't feel the effort was there to meet us halfway, or how that can be achieved where, I don't know, if maybe we weren't clear in the first round we went through with the compatibility issues that we were looking to see, but to see it again, basically the same submittal with a few added details, that I'm struggling with those details because international style is not Old Mission Presidio. So I'm being honest around the additions, but I am not in support of the project at this point.
Okay, so,
Appropriate for us to speak at this point?
no, it's not, it's comment period. But when we're done with comments, I'll give you your minute and a half, Ms. Bilston. So, okay, I have to say, when I first saw this project, I was like, no way. Like, I just can't do it. Because of the very reasons that Ms. Anderson is articulating and struggling with. But I'm also looking at the language of the motion that we made. And we did not say it has to match the main house. We said it has to be compatible with the neighborhood. So I don't want to punish you for having responded to what we directed you to do. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I think there's a lot of post-rationalization going on here, and I've done it myself. We've got a design, we like it, we're gonna go find something to justify it. And I think that's a lot of what's happening here. And I think in some ways that post-rationalization is working, in other ways it's not. So, I think, can you put up the existing proposal, or the current proposal, please?
Just touch it. Touch it with your finger.
Yeah, I know. If we had only known all these months that that was a touchscreen. So I think when I look at this, I think you're moving in the correct direction. I think you're trying to talk to the neighborhood, and that is appreciated. But I think there's still some areas where this is not working. So I'm going to, and I appreciate the idea of the, I'll call it the plinth, being this painted, sort of slump block look or adobe look. I don't really think that's necessary. It may be an added expense that you don't want to take on. I don't think it's going to, I think it'll be nice from a textural standpoint, but I think in terms of what we're looking at as a board, it's not going to make, like, that's not going to sell this for us. So if there's a cost-benefit analysis you do on that, I don't think that that's like a we have to have it thing, at least in my mind. But things that are like absolutes for me, and I'm not speaking for the board at large, are I would want to see plate heights limited to 9 feet on the first floor and 9 feet on the upper floor. I want to keep this thing down as much as possible because I know there's a grade down to the back. And so the degree to we can keep this down, but still give you some of your volume that you want so that it does not loom over the main house, I think is really important. And I think if you have a 9-foot plate height and as minimal a parapet as possible, that you will still feel good about what's going on inside. A 9-foot plate height psychologically feels a lot different than 8. Even 8.6 does. I personally wouldn't want to see any horizontal wood siding on anything. I don't want to see a gate with horizontal wood siding. I want this to feel like an old Irving Guild Pueblo something. I don't, and in order for it to do that, you're never going to see horizontal siding in there. I mean, that's all the rage these days, but that's not what was happening with that. And I would want to see windows that have breakups that are more traditional in nature than what we're seeing. I'm seeing windows that are very Mondrian-esque, and that speaks to international style, but it doesn't speak to what we're being pitched on in this slide. So, and I would want to see the gate that separates the rear yard from the existing primary residence. I would want to see that be of a design that is traditional and that speaks to the existing residence. So it feels like it belongs to the main residence. When it's locked down, you've got your main residence, and then you happen to have this very sort of simple wall back there that maybe does feel like the industrial building from, you're just looking at the industrial building from the backside of Milpas Street. And it kind of goes away. But it needs to come down in order to do that. It needs to be simplified. And it needs to be devoid of these more modernist and international style windows and other peripheral details. That's for me. That's my personal thoughts on it. And I think if we could see that, I could get behind it. So where does that leave us? I think you're coming back to the full board for another visit.
Chair Colas, did we want to circle back with the applicant's minute and a half at this time?
Yeah, if you'd like to take your minute and a half and address the board, you're welcome to do that, Ms. Bildston. Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to clarify compatibility was being discussed as to whether this project meets that or not. And our understanding is compatibility with the neighborhood as opposed to compatibility with the other structure that is on the property. So just being clear about that, and particularly since we are that 20-foot distance away, what standard exactly are we being held to in terms of compatibility, just because that suggests something altogether different?
Well, that's what I think I tried to clarify at the outset of my comments, where I understand that we directed you in our minutes to look at the neighborhood at large and be more compatible with the neighborhood as opposed to the main residence. So in my mind, that die is kind of already cast. And I was trying to address my comments, at least, in that direction.
My other question is, we were asked to do that study of the surrounding properties, and we collected that data, and it demonstrates that there's nothing particularly, beyond the norm in terms of what we're proposing here. So I'm just curious for any feedback on what significance that held and the importance of us having done that study.
Well, in my mind, there's only one residence on that survey that you did that is more of a modernist or international style. And so it told me that one is not the underlying fabric for the neighborhood. So it negates that as an opportunity stylistically in my mind, as opposed to a bungalow or a pueblo or a more Mediterranean, which seems to be, those three seem to be more the overarching fabric of the neighborhood.
I'll also just elaborate on the first point. Part of it is our guidelines, which I think, we're continuing to maybe develop and look at, but what it states is that if there's an addition or another entity on the property that it's supposed to match. But I think what we're kind of understanding is that at the previous board meeting, it alluded to it's okay if it at least is compatible with the rest of the neighborhood, even if it doesn't match the existing structure. But then how do we marry those two? And I'm in support of the comments too about that the gate probably helps to be that divide and works with the main house. And then this other one is like in the distance in the back, and it almost feels like you're a separate property and entity. But part of that is our current guidelines.
Okay, so if everybody's amenable, I'm going to make an attempt at a motion. So we would like to make a motion that this project return back to the full board for what we will hope is a final concept review, which sounds silly, but concept review, with the following direction. I'm trying to figure out what order I want to go in here. The board appreciates the applicant's additional information that they provided regarding the general styles within the neighborhood. Based upon the information provided, the board feels that either a Mediterranean bungalow or simple Pueblo style is acceptable, but that an international and modernist style is not in keeping with the underlying fabric of the existing neighborhood. That the direction in which the applicants appear to be moving is positive. The board would like to see a maximum of 9-foot plate heights on both the first and second floor levels. I've lost my screen. The board appreciates the color and textures of the exterior plaster and painted block that have been proposed, as well as the mission tile details. The applicant is requested to return with fencing and gate details associated with the ADU that are more traditional in nature and are not horizontal boards. That the punched windows are placed and configured in a manner that is more in keeping with traditional Pueblo-style architecture, for lack of a better way of putting it. And that the gate, which will provide a visual barrier between the existing main residence and ADU at the rear, be designed in such a manner that it matches the style of the existing main residence. The general goal is for the ADU to read as a simple structure with traditional Pueblo-style detailing. I'd like to take a straw vote from the board before I finish the motion on the skewed wall. Does anybody take exception to the skewed wall? Anybody take exception, raise your hand. Okay. That completes my motion. If you could please read it back.
Okay, so point 1 was the board appreciates the applicant's additional information they provided regarding the general styles within the neighborhood. Based upon the information provided, the board feels that either a Mediterranean bungalow or a simple Pueblo style is acceptable, but that an international modernist style is not in keeping with the underlying fabric of the existing neighborhood. Point 2, the direction in which the applicants appear to be moving is positive. Point 3, the board would like to see a maximum plate heights of 9 feet on both the first and second floor levels. Point 4, the board appreciates the color and textures of the exterior plaster and painted block that have been proposed, as well as the mission tile details. Point 5, the applicant is requested to return with fencing and gate details associated with the ADU that are more traditional in nature and are not horizontal boards. Point 6, the punched windows are placed and configured in a manner that is more in keeping with traditional Pueblo-style architecture. Point 7, the gate, which will provide a visual barrier between the existing residence and ADU at the rear, be designed in such a manner that it matches the existing style of the main residence. And point 8, the general goal is for the ADU to read as a simple structure with traditional Pueblo-style detailing.
Thank you. That was very nicely done, Ms. Johnson. Thank you.
Do you want to combine the two gate comments into one?
That's fine if you want to do that for record-keeping purposes. That's acceptable. Do we have a second for the motion?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay. And so we'll amend the motion with the comment from Ms. Lewis. And is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. If we could please take a roll call.
Chair Kloss,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Let's let her think. Let's move on to Ms. Lewis.
all right, Board Member Lewis,
Yes.
Board Member Graffitti,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson.
I am going to say no. I mean, it's on the same property to me, so I'm still struggling with that there's no property line in between and the compatibility. So, and for us to dictate another design style, I mean,
That's okay. It's why you're here. We're allowed to have a dissenting voice.
I mean, I know that I need to get used to, yeah, the separate, and I can, but I just like the whole, for us to like dictate another design style, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm just, I don't know, being honest, but.
It's okay.
Motion still passes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your patience with the process. Okay.
Chair Kloss, board members, do we need a brief break or shall we move on? I do want to recognize that this last applicant has, waited over an hour and a half for their item, but.
We're going to push through here. Item 4. Out comes the chocolate. 1405 Alameda Padre Serra. This is a proposal to renovate an existing 3,521 square foot single unit residence and construct a 340 square foot first floor addition, a 139 square foot second floor addition, a 320 square foot expansion of an existing second story deck, and a new 158 square foot covered patio at the basement level. The project includes a new in-ground swimming pool with cover and associated 671 square foot permeable pool deck and new doors and windows. The project will address violations outlined in Enforcement Case 2019-00643, including an interior remodel. A minor zoning exception is requested from the SFDB to approve an as-built site wall. The proposed total of 3,579 square feet on a 36,345 square foot lot is 74% of the maximum guideline floor to lot area ratio. No appealable action will take place at this hearing. Neighborhood preservation findings in Hillside Design District, as well as slope lot findings, will be required at the time of project design approval. If you could introduce yourself for the records, and we want to thank you very much for your patience.
Just pardon my interruption real quick. I just have to state something for the record to the board and to members of the public. There were 2 errors on the mailed blue postcard notice. The first being in the short project description, it did say that there was I believe, an expansion of the roof deck that was proposed, but it's really an expansion of the existing second story deck, and that's accurately reflected in the project description and the agenda. And then the previous owner was also listed on the mailed blue postcard, and it should be Catherine Buck and Kevin Preloger, just for the record. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I know that you guys have been pushing through. Thank you, Chair Kloss, and thank you, Holly. My name is Erin Lonnie Shadow. I work for Shubin Donaldson. Robin Donaldson would love to have been here to present this project, but he is out of town, so I'm here on his behalf. The owners are also out of town. They just dropped their son off at Thatcher, and they are headed back home to Chicago. They also have a daughter who will eventually be going to the Santa Barbara Junior High that's right next door. And their ultimate intention is to retire in this property. And that would be at the finish of construction. As of right now, they have a full-time tenant. So it's a very complicated project, to say the least. Look at this project description.
I'm going to grab some water, but I will be listening.
Yes. I will really try to be brief about this. And I think one of the better ways to go about this is to really walk around the property, starting at the north side, and just talk about the violations. And then I'll work my way to the west side, where we have a neighbor that actually called us with comment. So at the north side, we have an existing site wall that's 42 inches on the Alameda Padre side. However, it is something like 8.5 inches or 8.5 feet on the owner's side. That does straddle the property line, so it is partially within the, thank you, right of way. In addition to that, there is a trash enclosure that was never approved. There are 42-inch pilasters on either side. Those 42-inch, they are 5 feet 6 inches. They're tall and big. So one of the comments that we got in planning, let alone the fact that they were never approved, is that we have a triangle of visibility for the walkways as we pull up the driveway. There's the school. They're especially concerned about the school and the children walking across this property line or walking along this property line. So what we'd like to do is keep the wall there, the main 42-inch part of the wall, remove the trash enclosure, drop that down to be an at-grade planter, and then remove the pilasters. The one thing that we will absolutely have to figure out is where do the neighbors' mailboxes go? We will absolutely find a good spot for them. And we will talk to them before we come to any conclusion. On the east side of the property, we have a shared driveway going down to 1401 and 1403. That has all of their utilities. It is their main access. We are not proposing any changes along this property line. And that is also true for this drainage channel that runs parallel to that property line. So that drainage channel also has a large oak grove in it. So really, we're not proposing any changes to the east side of the house at all. At least not outside of the envelope of the east side of the house. On the southern side of the property, that channel drainage dives pretty deep. It's a pretty significant drop off. There is a small site wall that was flagged in the enforcement case. That site wall is part of a longer site wall that goes up the west side of the property. From what we can tell, it does have a foundation in the enforcement photos that were taken. There is rebar in there. It is about 18 inches tall, 15 inches of which shows over the grade, and it's just painted CMU. We don't plan to get rid of it, but we could definitely stand to paint it or plaster it or make it much nicer. And then up the west side, we were contacted by John Brailsford. And both Kathy and Kevin and I spoke to him, and ultimately he was concerned about the structural stability of that wall as it was built over some rubble rock, original like Franceschi style wall. And so we don't really know what's down there. So either they have in mind two solutions: either clad it all in stone so that it looks like in keeping with the original, or just remove it all together and just keep what was existing. The owner is open to either solution, and we totally intend to find a really good solution on that side. Okay, so that is it for the site violations. I will say that this south wall and this west wall were technically abated by the previous owner in a partial building permit. I don't know what it's worth at this point. Oh, good. All right, so I can zoom in here. So, really, off to the east, we have the school parking lot. There's not a whole lot you can see. We're completely shielded by oaks. Off to the west, we have John Brailsford and Children's property. Also, we can't really see that house too well. I know that he has visibility of that west wall and that south wall, which is why I think he has that aesthetic concern. From the street, we are, I swear, okay, nope. All right. Wondering if any of these show us how far down below the street we are. There you go. So we are actually located, like the top of our fireplace, not even the top of our ridge, is a number of feet below the wall. That's the existing carport. The violations around that carport really are the guardrails. We will be replacing all guardrails on this project. They're not consistent, and half of them don't conform. Let's see. On this side, you can see that the construction of this wall was pretty expansive. The terracing is really quite nice, and even the landscaping is worth keeping. So we're really hoping to keep this wall where it's at specifically. I think in order to not do the MZE, which I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, Holly.
Sure, thank you. So to the chair and board members, the project description does state that a minor zoning exception is requested, and it's specifically speaking to this front wall. I am going to be reviewing this further with the zoning staff more extensively. We initially kind of thought it would trigger an MZE. We just want to confirm height. It may trigger a modification, so not to be concerned with it at this point because it's just a first conceptual hearing, and we can gather supportive comments if we go into MZE territory on the next review.
Thank you, Holly. So moving on, let's see, what else do we have here? On the back side of the house, it's very unclear what actually has been permitted or not permitted on the back side of the house. We have an open, just that whole underside of deck, that's all flammable material. That door opens into what is now a sleeping area, which was never zoned to be a sleeping area, and that is one of the violations on record. Yeah, so we would basically want to sweep this slate a little bit clean and just really tidy this whole thing up. Okay, let me just see if there's anything else to state about this. I think we can move on. So we have an existing non-conforming structure, 5 feet of it toward the east is sitting within the side yard property. We do intend to expand continuous with that on the first floor level, which is the lower level. Let's go to the floor plans. So the kitchen itself, that's part of an enforcement case. That whole remodel is not on record. The whole uncovered deck, non-compliant guardrails, and what well, let me just finish up with the enforcement cases and I'll move on really fast. This is that workshop being used as a sleeping area, the recreation room with a full kitchen in it. The stair, so this is how they tried to close off the utility access, but then they had this door directly into the utility room. So basically the utility room with an operable FAU and a bunch of gas appliances is directly open to the house. So that has to be remedied as well. And I think that's pretty thorough at this point. And I will state that all the electrical was upgraded without permit. Is it par for the course?
Not that it's in high fire zone or anything.
Oh, yes. Okay, so to get to the good stuff, we definitely intend to clarify everything. We don't want any enforcement records on this. They want to retire here. They want to live here for the rest of their lives.
Excellent.
Upstairs, we have an addition that bumps out underneath the existing carport, new storage, new pantry with access from the carport directly into the house. The kitchen, we will fully remodel. That area will remain an 8-foot ceiling. I will say the plate heights are 8 foot and 8 foot. That's it. And we are maintaining existing plate heights. The existing covered deck will remain. We will freshen it all up. We will be adding a gas barbecue out there. The living room, one of the things that we will be changing is over here, you're going to see a big fireplace right where you don't want it in your beautiful view. We're going to demolish that. We're going to be removing the existing chimney up on the roof, and we will be adding a new fireplace that's parallel to the view. Hopefully, we do intend to develop that to be a bit more architectural than what's shown in this package. The other thing that we're getting rid of is this really, really rickety staircase, spiral staircase. We're going to do just a straight run staircase down. That actually has a really wonderful straight run out to the pool. We feel that it's the best way to create that access, and it creates a really dynamic moment inside. We will be removing the exterior stair access that was attached to the house and blocking that off with storage. There still will be the steps down from the upper carport to get down and around to the pool. The remodel will include the bedroom, the bathroom, the closet, everything. And we're going to be adding a new powder. The deck is basically expanding from, sorry, does it make you guys dizzy? I'm sure.
We're doing great.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so this line is the line of the existing patio. It actually bumps out a little bit further. We're going to be pulling that back, but we are going to be producing more deck and pushing out further with the rest of the deck. And then on top of that, we will have a shade trellis that's 50% shade. The house right now is 2 stories, no ins and outs, no shade whatsoever. Our goal is to provide a ton of southern shading, yeah. And then doing this, you can see this corner right here is going to be a planter because we cannot have deck in our setback. So that is actually the line of the basement, so we will be providing an overhang over the basement wall as well. All right, down at the basement level, we're going to be cleaning up the mechanical space. It's currently an exposed dirt mechanical space. We're going to be slurrying over that, adding a bunch of insulation, getting everything much happier. The condensing unit, we will place that outside in this corner that is no longer really visible or audible. And yeah, and we will only have access from the exterior. At the basement, we have the game room and we have a fully separated recreation room. For this permit phase, it will remain a recreation room. In the future, we would like it to be a JDU. We will also be formalizing this laundry and storage and then keeping that bath that was already permitted as part of the workshop. We will be expanding out with a deck and a new pool with stadium seating so they can enjoy the southerly view while cooling off, especially. And then we will be changing a little bit of the grade around the pool so that we can be maintaining a 30-inch drop so we don't need guardrails. I have a minute left, so I will just slowly scroll through some of these. This is the easterly elevation. We are actually maintaining a lot of the existing window openings, but we will be replacing all windows and doors. Right now we're showing sliding patio doors at all bedrooms and the recreation room, and that will help us comply with the exiting requirements while also getting maximum daylight. At the living area, even though we're showing sliding here, the client just recently wants to do large patio folding doors. They would really like that expansive one, I feel. That's the access to the utility room, ventilation. We'll definitely be addressing that. On the west elevation, we will be adding a couple of new windows into the master or the primary suite. This is existing. This is an existing window that we will be replacing. And then down here is also an existing window that we will be replacing. Another new window. And then at the entry, what we've done is we've actually placed another set of large, what will be folding doors at the entry and created more of an indoor-outdoor feel at their dining area. And then we also want to do a little bit of improvement because right now it's basically asphalt up to concrete at their entry, so it doesn't feel very special. There will be a new patio door off the third bedroom and another operable window for cross ventilation through the primary suite. And then at the southerly view, basically they have these large picture windows that are single glazed from the 50s, and they're really beautiful, but they're not going to comply with anything these days. So large folding doors, sliding doors at the bedrooms. The basement will have a folding door, and then same thing at the recreation room. And that concludes.
Painting, re-roofing.
So that is actually, as of last week, we were talking about another version of what we're seeing here. We are showing it in gray. The house is currently white, and we are considering keeping it white. And I was really pleased to hear that the owner actually wants to consider a metal roof. So we are thinking about putting a metal roof on here.
Okay. So finishes sort of TBD.
TBD.
Okay, great. Okay. Okay.
However, they will be very simple.
All right, thank you very much. So at this time, we'd like to open up public hearing for anybody who would like to speak to this item. Ms. Johnson?
All right, thank you, Chair Kalas. I'll start with the in-person public comment. At this time, I haven't received any speaker slips, and just as a reminder, if you do wish to speak in person, you can fill out a speaker slip by the back door. I don't see anyone moving to speak, so I'll go ahead and move to virtual public comment. If you wish to speak on Zoom, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. I don't see any hands raised on Zoom, but we did receive one letter from Dan Brailsford, and with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Kalas.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to open it up to the board for questions. Does anybody have any questions? I've got a question, so I'm going to go because no one's ready. I'm going to keep it rolling here. The wall that is along Alameda Padre Serra. I wasn't surprised to see this because I saw this getting constructed when the previous owner, and anyhow, we won't say anything more. Is there anything proposed for the top of that wall if it is able to remain? And the reason I ask is because in this area of town, we would either see a nice 6 to 8 inch block that has a slump top to it, that is hand chiseled, or we would see a veneered wall similar to the one that we have now, or a grouted wall where the, I'll call it the core grouting or mortar that you see is very narrow relative to the face stones. And when you look at the top of this, what you're seeing is about 5 inches of mortar, and then you're seeing veneer stone. And it's just not of the quality that we would expect in this part of town. So is there anything being proposed to resolve that?
Definitely. The dilemma that we do face is that the wall is 42 inches at that height, and that is our cap height. So we would have to negotiate that, or just simply add a capstone, and hopefully you guys would be happy with that solution. I think it would remain probably a lot like the capstone that you're seeing on the pilaster.
So maybe a 3
or 4 inch
with some slump to it.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And then we did receive a public comment, and it sounds like you've been in conversations with Mr. Brailsford. But there are concerns, and this really isn't our purview, about the integrity of a couple of these walls. So I'm assuming that there will be some sort of maybe structural investigation done on these walls that are in question in Mr. Brailsford's letter, and that you would be communicating the results of that to them, as well as how you propose to mitigate any structural deficiencies there?
Yeah, I think we'll be working fairly closely with them.
Okay.
Chair Kalas, board members, on that note, on the city's end, we would also review those types of things during the building department process through inspections and as they close out their enforcement case as well.
Okay, thank you. And there was a comment about the sewer line also, but I expect you would probably suffer through a sewer line inspection requirement as part of your permitting anyhow.
Yes.
Can we go back to the exterior elevations, either the east or westerly elevation? It looks like you have a very tall steel column detail that returns back to the home for your shade structure.
Yes.
Can you talk to me about that? Because it's actually one of the things that's kind of specifically denoted as a no-no in our guidelines. And so I'm very intrigued as to why this is being proposed.
So, as of last week in this review with the client, we have gotten approved to do a step back in that column. So the columns will remain where they're shown at the second level, the upper level. However, the first floor columns will move back in line with that wall, and they will be exposed in front of the recreation room, but they will be within the wall at the rest of the game room. I can be more clear on
So
that.
the deck will kind of cantilever over the column line?
Yes.
Okay. Those are really my only questions at this time. Anybody else?
Mine is just kind of general. You're basically not doing anything with the roof structure. You're just major remodel on the bottom floor and the upper floor, and you're adding in, and I was reading through all the violations, and you're cleaning up all the violations, the new owner, and yeah, okay. So no, I don't have any further questions.
I can start with comments. Okay.
Yeah, if there's no other questions. Yeah, or do you have any questions? No. Okay.
I think overall, well done, and trying to manage all the previous violations.
Sure you have a
walking us
spreadsheet for
through all
that.
of that. So yes, thank you. I think it'll be worth it to recover the sidewall that was at the lower end of the property, just for visuals on the Riviera. And I think more consideration for the color. I think, especially this view, looking at all of the properties, that most of them are light in color. And so really considering how it blends in with the other homes in the neighborhood. And I think overall it's a very beautiful design. I think it works well with the scale, stepping down with the pool and the pool deck and the balcony. I have no issues with that. And then it looks like even for privacy, there are some new windows, but I think there's sufficient space and screenings. And I would be in support of the minor zoning exception for the as-built site wall. And I am in support of removing the trash enclosure and piers, but adding a cap. I think especially if it comes in for visibility in the triangle, I'm not opposed to having the wall go up a few inches in order to add the cap instead of having to demolish more of the wall.
Great. Ms. Anderson?
I totally agree. Just, look forward to seeing if you're refining the colors from the dark that we see in the railings and the material details in the next submittal.
Yep, same. I agree. Thank you for all of the information and for working with the neighbors as well. I think there's going to be a lot of improvements with this, so that's great. And I would also be in support of the minor zoning exception with improving, adding a cap or open to other ideas. I liked Chair Kloss's idea. But overall, yeah, I think it's a great project.
Yeah, I think we're all generally in support of the project. I just have to say that anytime we can see something that has had illegal work done or unpermitted work that clearly isn't conforming, especially in these high fire areas, to see them come into conformance, it really helps support the overall resiliency of our community against wildfires. And so the idea that big exposed deck that's, just a tinder box is going to go away and be treated properly is just wonderful to see. So kudos for that. I would be in support of a minor zoning exception to keep the existing wall and to increase the height of it enough for a wall cap that is in keeping with the neighborhood. Like Ms. Lewis, I would also be in support of the removal of the trash enclosure and the pilasters that do not allow proper visibility. I would be very interested the next time you come back to see a landscape plan that would address the 8.5-foot retaining wall that is visible from the south side. I know that a lot of that is blocked potentially from down below by the home itself, but our guidelines have specific requirements. So the degree to which that could be softened with some landscaping that's maybe a little bit more robust than what's there right now. Looks like a lot of landscaping has been removed and it's very sparse right now. Although there is the cacti that do remain, the succulents are very nice. But it'd be nice to see something a little bit more robust against that wall. And would definitely want to see a revision to the manner in which the steel posts are treated. Other than that, I'd be looking for a landscape plan, and I'd be looking for some material information and color information for this next round, once you get through some of this more due diligence that you've got well ahead of you. So I think, do you want us to just, I'm assuming you'd be looking for an indefinite continuance back to our board for conceptual review?
That's correct.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion, or should I just repeat everything I just said? Okay. So,
a motion to approve.
right, okay, so I'd like to make a motion that the project be continued back to the full board for conceptual review. The board generally, the board is in support of this project and is very appreciative of the applicant and owner's willingness to abate the violations and create a more resilient structure in this very high fire zone. We will support a minor zoning and MZE for the existing unpermitted 42-inch wall that is on the north side of the property and that runs along the right-of-way at Alameda Padre Serra. We would support a modest increase in the height of that wall to provide a sandstone cap to the existing wall that would have roughly a 3 to 4 inch minimum thickness with a cushioned top and chiseled edges. We would ask that the applicant return with a modified design for the steel columns that support the southerly deck and associated shade structure. And we would like to see a landscape plan when the applicant returns that addresses any areas affected by the proposed work and that would help to soften and screen the 8.5-foot tall retaining wall at the north side of the property. And we would like to see the wall that runs along the southerly side of the property and up the westerly side, if it is kept in place and deemed structurally sound, we would like to see that clad in sandstone so that it matches the rest of the walls on the site. That's my motion.
Second.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Chair Kalas?
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson?
Yes.
Board Member Graffitti?
Yes.
Board Member Lewis?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Yes. Have a nice day. Thank you very much for your patience. Okay, bye-bye. And with that, we would like to adjourn and conclude the Single Family Design Board meeting for August 28th of 2023. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.